At my father's funeral, my sister-in-law stood over his open casket and announced that my husband and I are taking over the $500 million company. She told me to go sit in the back with the distant relatives because I was a failure. She did not know that 5 minutes later, my dead father would have the last laugh from beyond the grave. Literally. Before I tell you how a video from the afterlife destroyed my greedy family, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever waited for karma to strike. My name is Zara, and at 35 years old, I have spent my entire life being the invisible child. I am a crisis management expert in Chicago, dealing with billion-dollar bankruptcies. But to my family, I am just the girl who ran away. The wind off Lake Michigan was biting as I stepped out of my black sedan in front of the Ebenezer Baptist Church. It was a proper Chicago winter gray and unforgiving, matching the mood of the day. This was my father Elijah's homegoing service. He was a giant in the construction industry, the founder of Empire Stone, and a man who communicated better with blueprints than with his children. I adjusted my sunglasses and walked up the stone steps. I was not here to mourn a warm, fuzzy father figure. I was here to pay respects to a complicated man and to see if my suspicions about the rest of my family were true. The sanctuary was packed. Flowers lined the walls, lilies and white roses costing more than most people make in a year. The organist was playing a soft, mournful tune. I kept my head high and walked down the center aisle. I belonged in the front row. I was his eldest child. But as I reached the pew reserved for immediate family, a manicured hand shot out to block my path. It was Tiffany, my brother Dante's wife. She was a petite blonde woman wearing a designer black dress that was slightly too tight for a funeral, clearly intended to show off her baby bump. Her eyes scanned me up and down with open disdain. "Excuse me, Zara," she hissed, her voice loud enough for the first 3 rows to hear. "You need to find a seat in the back. This row is for the executives and owners of Empire Stone." I stopped and looked at her hand, then at her face. The audacity was breathtaking. "Tiffany, this is the family pew. I am his daughter." "Not anymore," she smirked. "You left 10 years ago to do whatever it is you do. File papers. Answer phones. Dante and I have been here every day building this legacy. We are the future of this company. This seat is for people who actually matter to the business. You are just a guest today, Zara. Go sit with the cousins you have not seen in a decade." I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I kept my face impassive. I looked past her to my brother Dante. He was standing right there in a suit that cost $5,000, but he looked cheap. He was slouching, his eyes fixed on the floor. He used to be a star athlete until laziness took over. Now he was just Tiffany's husband. "Dante, are you really going to let your wife bar your sister from sitting with her mother?" I asked, my voice calm but sharp. He mumbled something unintelligible and did not look up. He was terrified of her. He was terrified of losing the lifestyle she demanded. Then I looked at my mother Beatrice. She was sitting right there, clutching a lace handkerchief, dabbing at dry eyes. She looked up at me, and for a second, I hoped she would be the mother I remembered from my childhood, the one who taught me to be strong. "Mom, tell her to move," I said. My mother looked at me, her eyes tired and red. Then she looked at Tiffany, and her gaze dropped to Tiffany's stomach. "Zara, please," she said, her voice trembling. "Just do as she says. Do not cause a scene today of all days. Tiffany is carrying the heir to the Empire Stone dynasty. She needs the space. You know how it is. You are just here to visit, but they are staying to lead." The sting was sharp and familiar. Even at my father's funeral, I was second class. To them, I was just Zara, the failure, the one who moved downtown to live in a small apartment and work a desk job. They had no idea I lived in the penthouse of the Sovereign building. They had no idea my company cleaned up corporate messes for Fortune 500 CEOs. They thought I was a secretary because I never corrected them. I preferred moving in silence. "Fine," I said calmly. I stepped back and sat in the second row directly behind Tiffany. I watched as she smoothed her dress and whispered something to Dante, looking triumphant. She thought she had won. She thought this was the beginning of her reign as the Queen of Chicago real estate. She had no idea she was sitting on a throne of dynamite. The service began. The choir sang Amazing Grace with a power that shook the stained glass windows. People gave speeches about Elijah the builder, the visionary, the pillar of the community. They spoke of his generosity and his strength. I sat in silence, remembering a father who was hard on me because he expected perfection, and who ignored Dante because he expected nothing. It was a complex grief. I missed the potential of what we could have had more than the reality of what we did have. Finally, the pastor announced the family representative. I expected Dante to stand up. He was the son, the golden boy, the one who was supposed to carry the name. Instead, Tiffany stood. She walked to the podium, her heels clicking loudly on the wood floor. She adjusted the microphone and took a dramatic pause, wiping a non-existent tear from her eye. She looked out at the sea of black faces, the community leaders, the business partners, the politicians. She loved this. She loved the attention. Today we lost a legend, she began, her voice quivering with practiced emotion. Elijah was like a father to me. He trusted me and Dante implicitly. He knew that family is about who shows up, not just who shares blood. I saw my mother nod in agreement from the front row. The jab was aimed directly at me. In his final days, he told us his vision. Tiffany continued, her voice gaining strength. He wanted Empire Stone to grow. He wanted us to take his $500 million legacy and double it. He knew that Dante and I were the only ones capable of handling such a massive responsibility. He left the future in our hands. A murmur went through the crowd. Discussing the monetary value of the estate during the eulogy was tacky even for Tiffany. She was staking her claim publicly before the body was even cold. She was making sure everyone knew who the new boss was. She ignored the whispers and continued gripping the podium. As the new matriarch of this family and CEO of Empire Stone, I promise to honor his wealth by spending it wisely and expanding our reach. We will not let outsiders or those who abandon this family take a single dime of what Dante and I have earned through our loyalty. I saw her glance at me. It was a declaration of war. She was telling me that I was getting nothing. She was telling the world that she had won the jackpot. And that is when it happened. Tiffany took a breath to continue. As I prepare to sign the papers to take full control, she never finished that sentence. Suddenly, a loud static noise erupted from the speakers, cutting her off. It was a harsh screeching sound that made everyone cover their ears. Tiffany jumped back from the microphone, looking confused. The massive LED screen behind the choir loft, usually reserved for displaying hymn lyrics or photos of the deceased, flickered to life. The static cleared, revealing a high-definition video. It was a recording room. Dark wood paneling, leather books in the background. And sitting in a wingback leather armchair holding a glass of dark liquor was my father. He looked healthy. He looked sharp. He was wearing his favorite navy suit, the one he wore when he closed the biggest deals of his life, and he was looking directly into the camera lens with a glint in his eye that I knew very well. Tiffany froze. Her mouth hung open. The congregation gasped. On the screen, my dead father took a slow sip of his drink. He swirled the amber liquid in the glass. Then he leaned forward toward the camera and let out a chuckle. It was not a warm laugh. It was a dry, raspy laugh. A laugh that said, "I know something you do not know." It echoed through the silent church, bouncing off the vaulted ceilings. "Tiffany Dante," my father said on the screen, his voice booming through the sound system. "I knew it. I knew you would be standing there right now talking about my money." Tiffany turned pale. She looked at the screen, then at the pastor, then at Dante. "Turn it off!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "He is senile. This is a mistake. Turn it off right now." But the video did not stop. My father on the screen just kept smiling, that cold, knowing smile. "If you are hearing this, it means I am dead and you are probably trying to measure the drapes for my office," my father continued. You want the $500 million, do you? You want the keys to the kingdom? Well, I have a surprise for you. A little game. Because if you think you are taking my empire without a fight, you did not know me at all. The screen went black for a second, and then a countdown timer appeared. Tiffany looked like she was about to faint. My mother looked horrified. Dante was trembling. I sat back in my pew and crossed my legs. A small smile played on my lips. I knew my father. He was a man who planned for everything, and I had a feeling the show was just beginning. The countdown on the massive LED screen hit 0, and for a heartbeat, the sanctuary was plunged into absolute silence. The static was gone, replaced by the crystal-clear image of my father Elijah sitting in his private study. It was a room very few people were allowed to enter, a sanctuary of dark mahogany shelves filled with leather-bound books and the smell of expensive tobacco. On screen, he looked nothing like the frail man who had wasted away in a hospital bed for the last 6 months. Here he was, the titan of Chicago, the man who built skyscrapers from nothing. He held a crystal tumbler filled with amber liquid in one hand and a lit cigar in the other. The sight alone sent a ripple of shock through the congregation. Drinking and smoking in the house of the Lord during his own funeral service. It was quintessential Elijah. He did not care about optics. He cared about control. He took a slow, deliberate sip of his drink, his eyes locking with the camera lens. It felt like he was staring right through the screen, right at the front row where Tiffany stood trembling by the podium. "Hello, family," my father's voice boomed, filling the vaulted ceilings of the church. "If you are watching this, it means my heart finally gave out. I hope the funeral was tasteful. I hope Beatrice did not buy the cheap lilies." My mother let out a small gasp from the pew, clutching her chest. She had indeed bought the cheap lilies, trying to save money for Dante. Even from the grave he knew. My father on the screen swirled his drink. "But let us cut to the chase, shall we? I am recording this because I know exactly what is happening right now. I know my son Dante is sitting in the front row looking like a lost puppy in a suit he cannot afford. And I know his wife Tiffany is standing at the podium, probably wearing something too tight, telling everyone how much I loved her." The church erupted in whispers. Tiffany turned a shade of red I had never seen before. She looked around wildly, as if searching for a remote control to mute the dead man. "He is not in his right mind," she hissed at the pastor, who stood off to the side, looking bewildered. "Turn this off. It is disrespectful." But the video continued louder this time, drowning out her protests. "I bet she just announced that she is the new CEO," my father continued on screen, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "I bet she told you all about the $500 million valuation of Empire Stone. I bet she used words like legacy and future." He leaned forward, the leather of his chair creaking audibly through the speakers. And then he laughed. It was not a joyful sound. It was a guttural, dry chuckle that started low in his throat and built into a hacking cough before settling back into a wheezing amusement. It was the sound of a predator watching prey walk into a trap. It was chilling. "You two running my company," he said, wiping a tear of laughter from his eye. "Oh, that is rich. That is the best joke I have heard in years. Tiffany, you cannot even run a household budget without overdrawing the credit cards I pay for. And Dante, my son, you have never made a business decision that did not end in a lawsuit." Dante shrank into his seat, putting his head in his hands. The humiliation was total. The business partners in the back rows were exchanging looks. The facade of the competent heir was crumbling in real time. "But I am a fair man," my father said, his expression suddenly hardening. The humor vanished instantly, replaced by the steely gaze that had terrified subcontractors for 40 years. "If you want the money so badly, if you want the title of CEO, if you think you are worthy of sitting in my chair, then I have a proposition for you. A game." Tiffany stepped away from the podium, her hands shaking. "This is illegal," she screamed, her voice shrill and panic-stricken. "He was medicated when he made this. This is not a valid will. Someone stop this right now." She looked at me. Her eyes were wide with fear and rage. "Do something, Zara," she spat. "He is humiliating us." I did not move a muscle. I crossed my legs and smoothed the fabric of my black dress. This was the most interesting meeting I had attended in years. "Let him speak, Tiffany," I said calmly, my voice cutting through the murmurs. "Unless you are afraid of what he has to say." My father on the screen took another drag of his cigar. "You claim to be the future of Empire Stone," he said, smoke curling around his face. "So I am giving you a chance to prove it. The lawyers have the paperwork. The company is yours. The assets are yours. The title is yours." Tiffany stopped screaming. Her head snapped back to the screen. A look of pure greed washed over her panic. She grabbed Dante's arm and pulled him upright. "Did you hear that?" she whispered loudly. "He said it is ours." But my father was not finished. However, he continued, his voice dropping an octave. "Heavy is the head that wears the crown. You want the $500 million. You can have it, but you have to wait. Because I have instructed my attorney, Mr. Sterling, to keep the official reading of the will sealed for exactly 7 days from this moment." "Why?" Tiffany yelled. "Why wait? Give it to us now." "For the next 7 days, you will have provisional control," my father said. "You can sit in the office. You can give orders. You can feel what it is like to be me. But be warned, the view from the top is not what you think it is." He paused and the camera zoomed in on his face. "And one more thing. To my daughter Zara." The air left my lungs. I had expected him to ignore me. I had expected to be left out of this twisted final act, just as I had been left out of his life for the past decade. I saw my mother turn to look at me. Dante peeked through his fingers. Tiffany glared daggers. "Zara," my father said, his voice softer now, almost unrecognizable. "I know you are sitting there, probably in the back, probably wearing black, probably judging me. You always were the smartest person in the room. You left because you saw through the noise. You saw the cracks in the foundation before anyone else." He took a sip of his drink, and for a split second his eyes shifted. He looked away from the center of the lens and looked slightly to the left, directly into the camera. It was a subtle movement, something no one else would notice. But I knew that look. It was the look he used to give me when we played chess when I was a child. It was the look that said, "Checkmate in 3 moves." It was a signal. "Do not intervene, Zara," he said, staring right at me through the screen. "Watch. Just watch. Let them play their hand." The screen abruptly went black. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Then the side door of the sanctuary opened and Mr. Sterling walked in. He was a tall man with silver hair and a suit that cost more than my car. He carried a leather briefcase and walked with the unhurried pace of a man who billed by the hour. He walked straight to the podium, ignoring Tiffany, who was still standing there, hyperventilating. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sterling said, his voice smooth and professional. "As per the instructions of the late Elijah Brooks, the video portion of the testament has concluded. The official reading of the last will and testament, along with the transfer of all assets and liabilities, will take place at my office in exactly 1 week. Until then, Mr. Dante and Mrs. Tiffany have been granted temporary power of attorney to manage the daily operations of Empire Stone." Tiffany let out a squeal of delight. She threw her arms around Dante. "We did it, baby," she cried, tears of relief streaming down her face. "We got it. Did you hear him? He said the company is ours. He said the assets are ours." She turned to the congregation, her confidence surging back instantly. "You all heard him," she shouted, spreading her arms wide. "Elijah wanted us to lead. He was just having his fun. He was a joker till the end, but he left it to us. The delay is just a formality." My mother stood up and hugged them both, sobbing. "My son, the CEO," she wailed. "Oh, Elijah would be so proud." I watched them celebrate. They were high-fiving. They were shaking hands with the confused business partners. They were acting like they had just won the lottery. Sterling stepped down from the podium and walked up the aisle. As he passed my pew, he slowed down just for a fraction of a second. He did not look at me. He did not nod. But as he passed, he tapped his index finger against the side of his briefcase twice. It was the second signal. I looked back at the blank screen where my father's face had been. That look. That specific look into the camera lens. He knew I would be watching. He knew I would be the only one to see it. He was not giving them the kingdom, he was giving them a rope. Tiffany was now holding court at the front of the church, accepting condolences that were quickly turning into congratulations. "Zara," she called out, seeing me standing there. "I guess you should have stayed in touch, huh? Maybe if you visited Dad more often, he would have left you a little something. But do not worry. When Dante and I get the payout next week, maybe we will hire you. We are going to need someone to clean the toilets at the new headquarters." She laughed and her friends laughed with her. My mother looked at me with pity. "You should go, Zara," my mother said. "This is a celebration of your father's legacy. You do not belong here." I put on my sunglasses. I looked at Tiffany glowing with the promise of $500 million. I looked at Dante weak and sweating, already terrified of the responsibility. "Enjoy the next 7 days," I said quietly. "It is a long way down from the top." I turned and walked out of the church into the biting Chicago wind. I pulled my coat tight around me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an automated alert from my internal system at work. A new file had been uploaded to the secure server. I unlocked my phone. The file was named Project Icarus. I smiled. My father did not just leave a will. He left a weapon. And he left the trigger with me. The game had officially begun. The drive from the church to the family estate in Kenwood was less than 5 miles, but it felt like crossing into a different dimension. The heater in my car hummed, fighting against the brutal Chicago winter, but I could still feel the chill settling deep into my bones. It was not just the weather. It was the knowledge that the truce of the funeral was over. The 7-day clock my father started had begun ticking, and I knew exactly how my brother and his wife would spend it. They would spend it trying to erase me. I pulled up to the wrought iron gates of the house I grew up in. It was a sprawling Georgian brick mansion that my father had bought 30 years ago. It was the symbol of his success, the physical proof that a black man from the South Side could build an empire and live like a king. I had not slept under its roof in a decade, but I still had a key. Or at least I thought I did. I parked my car on the street, avoiding the driveway that was already filled with Dante's leased sports car and Tiffany's massive SUV. I just wanted to get a few things. My father had a collection of vintage architectural blueprints in his study. He had promised them to me years ago. They were not worth millions like the company, but they were the only things he owned that I actually cared about. I wanted to secure them before Tiffany decided they clashed with her aesthetic and threw them in the trash. I walked up the long driveway, my boots crunching on the fresh snow. The house loomed over me, dark and imposing. I reached the heavy oak front door and slid my key into the lock. It did not turn. I jiggled it, thinking the cold had frozen the mechanism. Nothing. It hit metal and stopped. I took a step back and looked closer. The brass hardware I remembered was gone. In its place was a sleek black panel with a biometric fingerprint scanner and a keypad. It was brand new. The installation looked rushed, the wood around the edges still slightly raw. They had changed the locks. They had left the funeral of our father, and the first thing they did was call a locksmith. The speed of their greed was impressive. I rang the doorbell. I could hear it chime deep inside the house. I waited. The wind whipped my hair across my face, stinging my cheeks. I rang it again, holding the button down longer this time. Finally, I heard the heavy thud of the deadbolt sliding back. The door swung open. Dante stood there. He had taken off his funeral jacket and tie, his white dress shirt unbuttoned at the top. He held a glass of scotch in one hand. Our father's scotch, I noted, and he looked flushed, not with grief, but with the adrenaline of power. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice slurring slightly. He blocked the doorway using his body as a barrier. I live here, Dante, I said, keeping my voice level. Or at least I did. I came to get some of my things, and I came to get the blueprints Dad promised me. You do not live here, he sneered. You visit, and right now you are trespassing. This is private property. Open the door, Dante. Do not be ridiculous. He laughed a short, sharp sound. I am the CEO now, Zara. Temporary or not, I am in charge. And the CEO does not want unauthorized personnel in his residence. He reached behind the door and pulled out a battered old suitcase. It was a cheap blue fabric thing I had used for summer camp when I was 12. It was lumpy and overstuffed. We did you a favor, he said. Tiffany said we needed to clear out the junk rooms. We are making space, you know how it is. Utah. New energy. He threw the suitcase. He did not hand it to me. He tossed it casually down the front steps. It hit the concrete with a wet thud and burst open. Old clothes spilled out into the snow. My high school yearbook, a trophy from a debate tournament, a stuffed bear I had kept since I was 5. I watched as the snow began to wet the pages of the yearbook. I watched my childhood memories being treated like garbage. I did not move to pick them up. I just looked at him. Is that necessary? I asked. We are cleaning house, Zara, he said, taking a sip of his drink. We are getting rid of everything that does not fit the new vision. And frankly, you do not fit. From above, I heard the sound of sliding glass. I looked up. Tiffany was standing on the balcony of the master bedroom. My parents' bedroom. She had wrapped herself in my mother's white mink coat, a coat my father had bought for their 25th anniversary. It looked ridiculous on her, too big and ostentatious, but she wore it like a queen surveying her subjects. Problem, darling, she called down, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Zara wants to come inside, Dante shouted up to her. She thinks she still has rights here, Tiffany laughed. Oh, honey, that is adorable. Does she not know? She looked down at me, leaning over the railing. Zara, you really should check your email more often. Or maybe you just do not understand how the law works. What did you do, Tiffany? I asked. My eyes locked on hers. Mom signed the papers this morning, she said, examining her fingernails. While you were driving over here, probably plotting how to steal our money, Mom was signing a document. It grants Dante full exclusive rights to manage the family estate and all residential properties effective immediately. It is a security measure, you know, to protect the assets until the will is probated. My stomach turned. They had manipulated our mother. They had used her grief and her fear to get her to sign away her own home before the funeral flowers had even wilted. Where is Mom? I asked. I want to hear that from her. She is resting, Tiffany said. She is very fragile. She does not want to be disturbed by your drama. She agrees with us, Zara. She thinks it is best if you keep your distance. You upset her at the church. You and your little threat about Dad. She needs peace. And you are not peace. You are a problem. I looked at the window next to the balcony. The curtains were drawn, but I saw a shadow move. A hand pulled the fabric back just an inch. I saw a sliver of a face. My mother. She was watching. She was standing there in the warmth of the house her husband built, watching her son throw her daughter's life into the snow. She saw me. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second across the cold distance. Mom, I mouthed. She did not open the window. She did not step out to stop them. She let the curtain fall back into place. She turned away. That was the answer. That was the final nail. She had chosen. She had chosen the son who needed her money over the daughter who only wanted her love. She had chosen the lie over the truth. Tiffany clapped her hands together. All right, show is over. Grab your trash and get off my driveway. We have architects coming in an hour. We are going to gut the library. It is too dark. We need something more modern, more us. The library. My father's study. The room where he filmed his final message. The room where he kept his blueprints. They were going to destroy it. They were going to erase him. I looked at Dante. He was smirking, feeling big and powerful because his wife told him he was. I looked at Tiffany preening in a stolen coat, and I looked at the closed curtain where my mother hid. I could have screamed. I could have fought Dante right there on the steps. I could have called the police and claimed illegal eviction. I could have caused the scene they so clearly wanted me to cause. They wanted me to break. They wanted me to be the crazy, angry sister so they could justify cutting me out. I took a deep breath. The air was freezing, but it cleared my head. I walked down the steps and knelt in the snow. I gathered the wet clothes. I picked up the yearbook. I shook the snow off the teddy bear. I packed them back into the broken suitcase and zipped it shut. I stood up and brushed the snow off my knees. I did not look at Dante. I looked up at the balcony directly at Tiffany. "You are going to renovate the library?" I asked, my voice carrying clearly in the cold air. "Yes," she said, challenging me. "We are going to burn all those dusty old books." "Why?" "Just a piece of advice," I said calmly. "Be careful with the structural walls. Dad built this house himself. He put things in the walls. He built it to last." I paused, letting that sink in. "And Tiffany, take care of that coat. It is vintage. It would be a shame if you ruined it before you actually owned it." "What is that supposed to mean?" She snapped, her smile faltering. "It means enjoy the house," I said. "Enjoy the heat. Enjoy the scotch. You have 7 days." I picked up the suitcase. It was heavy, sodden with melted snow. "Giuliani said you are trespassing," Dante shouted, trying to regain control of the interaction. "Get out now, or I call the cops." "I am leaving, Dante," I said, turning my back on him. "Keep the key. You are going to need it more than I do." I walked back to my car. I did not run. I did not look back. I could feel their eyes on me. I could feel their confusion. They expected tears. They expected begging. They did not know what to do with silence. I opened the trunk and threw the wet suitcase inside. I got into the driver's seat and locked the doors. My hands were shaking, not from the cold but from the sheer force of the rage I was suppressing. I looked at the house one last time. The lights were on. It looked warm and inviting from the outside, but inside it was rotting. They thought they had locked me out. They thought they had won the castle. They did not realize that I was the one who paid the mortgage. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. It was not a family member. It was not a friend. It was the private line of Mr. Sterling, my father's attorney. Sterling answered on the first ring. "Zara, I assume you are leaving the estate." "They changed the locks, Sterling," I said, putting the car in gear. "And Mom signed over management rights to Dante." I heard the rustle of papers on the other end. "I anticipated that might happen," Sterling said. "Your father anticipated it too. That is why we have the contingency." "Is it ready?" I asked. "It is ready," Sterling replied. "But Zara, once we execute this, there is no going back. This is the nuclear option. Are you sure you want to do this to your mother?" I looked at the upstairs window where the curtain had moved. I thought about the wet teddy bear in my trunk. I thought about the $500 million lie they were telling the world. She made her choice. I said, my voice flat. She closed the curtain. "Execute it." "Very well," Sterling said. "I will notify the banks immediately." I hung up and drove away. The gates of the estate closed behind me. I did not feel a sense of loss. I felt the cold clarity of a surgeon preparing to cut out a tumor. They wanted a war. They wanted to play games with inheritance and legacy. They forgot that while they were playing house, I was the one who held the deed. I drove toward the city, toward my real life, toward the glass and steel tower where I was not just a daughter or a sister. I was the cleaner. And I had a lot of trash to take out. The notification on my phone pinged at 6 in the morning. It was an email with a high-priority flag from a law firm I recognized. Not because they were prestigious, but because they were the strip mall ambulance chasers Tiffany used for her petty disputes. The subject line read, "Outstanding obligations regarding the estate of Elijah Brooks." I sat up in my bed in the penthouse overlooking the Chicago skyline and opened the attachment. It was an invoice, a bill for $50,000. I scrolled through the itemized list. It included the platinum casket, the extravagant floral arrangements I was not allowed to choose, the catering for the reception I was not invited to, and curiously, a $20,000 credit card bill under my mother's name. At the bottom of the document, there was a note written in legal jargon that boiled down to a simple, insulting premise. Since Dante is the heir to the corporate assets and the future of the family legacy, the female sibling is responsible for the domestic and ceremonial debts, as per traditional familial duty. They wanted me to pay for the party where they spat in my face. They wanted me to clear my mother's shopping debt so Dante could inherit a clean slate. It was not just greedy. It was a tactical insult. They were testing me. They wanted to see if I was still the obedient little girl who would set herself on fire to keep them warm. I did not reply to the email. Instead, I texted my mother, "Meet me at the coffee shop on 35th Street, 10 a.m. Do not bring Dante. Do not bring Tiffany." She agreed. I knew she would. She probably thought I was bringing a check. I walked into the cafe at 10 sharp. It was a small place near the old neighborhood, far enough from the city center that my mother felt comfortable but close enough to the financial district that I could get back to my real life quickly. Beatrice was already there, sitting in a corner booth. She was wearing black morning clothes, but I noticed the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist. It was new, likely part of that $20,000 credit card debt she expected me to pay. She looked tired. Her eyes were puffy and she was wringing her hands around a paper cup. When she saw me, she did not smile. She just looked relieved in a way that made my stomach turn. "Zara," she said, her voice trembling. "Thank you for coming. It has been such a hard week. Your brother is under so much pressure." I sat down across from her. I did not order anything. I placed my phone on the table face down. "I got the email, Mom," I said. "The invoice from Tiffany's lawyer." Beatrice sighed, a long, suffering sound that used to make me feel guilty when I was a child. Now it just sounded like manipulation. "It is just a formality, Zara," she said, reaching for my hand. I pulled back. "You know how expensive funerals are. And with your father gone, everything is frozen. We need to clear the debts so Dante can start fresh. He is the CEO now. He cannot be bogged down with these petty bills. So I am the petty cash fund." I asked, my voice level. "I am good enough to pay for the flowers, but not good enough to sit in the front row. I am good enough to pay off your credit card, Mom, but not good enough to have a key to my own childhood home." Her face hardened slightly. "Do not be difficult, Zara. You have a good job. You have no children, no husband. You have expenses, sure, but nothing like what Dante has. He has a wife, a baby on the way. He has a legacy to maintain. The $500 million is tied up in the company. He is illiquid right now. He needs cash flow." Illiquid. It was a word she had heard Dante use, and she was parroting it without understanding what it meant. Dante was not illiquid. He was broke. There was a difference. "I am not paying it, Mom," I said. "I am not paying for Tiffany's show. And I am not paying for your bracelet." She looked at her wrist and covered the diamonds with her other hand. This was a gift, she lied. From Dante, to comfort me. Bought with credit, I realized. Credit they expected me to pay off. Beatrice leaned forward, her eyes filling with tears. They were real tears, but they were weaponized. "Zara, listen to me. I know you have savings. I know you have that little retirement fund from your administrative job. I remember you told me once you were saving for a condo." I stared at her. She thought I was a secretary. She thought my life savings was maybe $50,000 or $60,000 scraped together over a decade of answering phones. And she wanted it. She wanted me to drain my entire future to pay for 1 week of Dante life. "You want me to empty my savings?" I asked, clarifying the cruelty. You want me to give you everything I have. It is for the family, she whispered. Your father would want us to support Dante. He is the man of the house now. It is your duty, Zara. You are the big sister. You are supposed to sacrifice. That is what women do. We hold the family up so the men can build. I looked at the woman who gave birth to me. I looked for a trace of the mother who used to braid my hair. I found nothing. I only saw a woman who had been brainwashed by tradition and blinded by favoritism. She was willing to bankrupt her daughter to buy her son a new suit. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. No, I said. Beatrice blinked, shocked. What do you mean, no? I mean, I am not paying $50,000. I am not paying 50 cents. Dante wants to be the big man. Let him pay his own bills. You are selfish, she hissed, her sorrow vanishing instantly replaced by anger. You have always been cold. You left us. You abandoned this family to go play city girl. And now, when we need you, you turn your back. You are ungrateful, Zara. We raised you. We fed you. You owe us. I looked down at her. I adjusted my silk scarf. It cost more than her car, but she would never know that. I do not owe you anything, Mom, I said. And tell Tiffany to stop sending me legal threats. My lawyers are much more expensive than hers. I walked out of the cafe, leaving her sitting there with her mouth open. I walked into the cold Chicago air and got into my car. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just sat there gripping the steering wheel and feeling the cold, hard truth settle in my chest. She thought I was selfish. She thought I had never done anything for them. She had no idea. I closed my eyes and let the numbers scroll through my mind. $200,000. That was the number. That was the amount of money I had secretly funneled into my parents' accounts over the last 2 years. When my father got sick, the insurance denied his experimental treatment. It cost $12,000 a month. My mother thought the insurance company had a change of heart. They did not. I paid it. I set up a shell company called Z Capital and paid the hospital directly. When the mortgage on the big house fell behind, because Dante stole the property tax money, I paid it. I sent the bank a check every month for 2 years. My mother thought my father had a secret savings account. He did not. It was me. I paid for the roof repair. I paid for the new furnace. I paid for the car insurance. I did it all anonymously because I knew if they knew it came from me, they would not be grateful. They would just ask for more. They would see me as a bank, not a daughter. My father knew. Towards the end, he figured it out. That was why he looked at the camera. That was why he left the game to me. He knew I was the one keeping the lights on. My mother sat in that cafe calling me ungrateful, while wearing clothes I effectively paid for living in a house I saved from foreclosure. And now she wanted to take the imaginary pittance she thought I had left. I started the car. The engine purred a low, aggressive growl. They wanted to talk about money. They wanted to talk about debts and obligations. Fine. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. I navigated to the recurring transfers, the monthly payments to the Kenwood estate mortgage, the payments to the healthcare providers, the payments that kept their illusion of wealth alive. I selected all. I hit cancel. Confirm cancellation, the screen asked. I tapped yes. The transfer stopped. The safety net was gone. You want Dante to be the man of the house? I whispered to the empty car. You want him to provide. Let us see how he handles the real bills, Mom. Let us see how long the lights stay on when the invisible daughter stops paying the electric bill. I put the car in drive and merged into traffic. I was done being the safety net. I was done being the insurance policy. If they wanted to burn bridges, I would supply the gasoline. The $50,000 invoice was an insult, but the silence that was coming, the financial silence that was about to hit them, that was going to be deafening. I checked the time. I had a meeting with Mr. Sterling in an hour. It was time to stop being the daughter and start being the creditor. The elevator ride to the 45th floor of the Sovereign building was always the only 60 seconds of peace I got in a day. It was a glass capsule shooting up the side of the Chicago skyline, leaving the noise and the grit of the streets far below. As the city shrank beneath my feet, I felt the persona of Zara, the disappointed daughter, slipping away, replacing it with the woman I actually was. The doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing my sanctuary. My penthouse was not a home in the traditional sense. It was a command center wrapped in Italian marble and floor-to-ceiling glass. There were no family photos on the mantel. There was no clutter. It was stark cold and efficient, just like me. I tossed my keys onto the island and walked straight to my office. My family thought I pushed paper for a living. They thought I was a mid-level administrator at some nameless corporation. The truth was far more lucrative and far more dangerous. In the high-stakes world of corporate Chicago, I was known simply as the cleaner. When a CEO was caught embezzling funds, I was the one the board called to mitigate the fallout. When a merger was about to implode because of hidden debt, I was the one who went in and restructured the assets. I did not build companies. I salvaged them, or I buried them, depending on what the client paid for. I dealt in secrets leverage and the ugly truth that people hid behind their balance sheets. I sat down at my desk, a massive slab of black obsidian that cost more than Dante's car. I woke up my computer system. 3 monitors hummed to life. The security protocols required a retinal scan and a 20-character password. I typed it in without looking. It was time to see what my father had really left behind. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the secure server. The file my father had referenced in his video project Icarus was ready for access. I clicked the folder. My father, Elijah Brooks, was a brilliant builder, but he was old school. He kept physical ledgers and paper trails. But 2 years ago, when his health started failing, he had hired an external audit firm, a firm that I secretly owned. He never knew Z Capital was me, but he trusted the firm to give him the unvarnished truth. And now I was looking at the raw data that had killed him. I opened the master financial file for Empire Stone. The numbers on the screen were a sea of red. Tiffany had stood at the pulpit and bragged about a $500 million valuation. She had screamed about generational wealth. She had preened like a peacock, thinking she had won the lottery. I leaned back in my chair and let out a low breath. She was wrong. She was so catastrophically wrong it was almost tragic. Empire Stone did have $500 million in assets. That part was true. The buildings, the heavy machinery, the land contracts, the brand equity. On paper, it looked like a titan. But Tiffany and Dante had never bothered to look at the liability column. They only saw the revenue, not the hemorrhaging debt. I drilled down into the accounts payable. The company was bleeding. There were loans on top of loans. The primary line of credit from the bank was maxed out at $100 million. There were secondary high-interest loans from private equity groups totaling another $200 million. There were liens on almost every piece of heavy machinery the company owned. But the real horror story was in the operational expenses. I opened the file labeled Executive Discretionary Spending. This was Dante handwriting. For the last 5 years, while my father was undergoing chemo and fighting for his life, Dante had been given signatory power over the operational accounts. He was supposed to be running the day-to-day business. Instead, he had been looting it. I scrolled through the transactions, my eyes narrowing. $200,000 for client relations consulting paid to a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. I ran a quick trace on the company. The director was listed as Tiffany's mother, $50,000 a month for vehicle leasing. I clicked the details. It was not for construction trucks. It was for a fleet of luxury SUVs and a Bentley, all registered to Dante and Tiffany's home address. First-class travel to Paris, Milan, and Dubai, listed as market research. 5-star hotels. Designer clothing expensed as uniforms. Jewelry expensed as office supplies. Dante had not just been lazy, he had been a parasite. He had hollowed out the company from the inside, using my father's illness as a cover to steal millions. He had funded Tiffany's lifestyle, the lifestyle she rubbed in my face, with money that did not exist. I did the final math in my head. Assets $500 million. Liabilities including the bank loans, the private equity debt, the unpaid vendor invoices, and the pending lawsuits from subcontractors Dante had stiffed totaled $520 million. Empire Stone was not a fortune, it was a corpse. The company was technically insolvent. It was negative $20 million in the hole. The only reason the banks had not foreclosed yet was because of my father's personal reputation. They had held off out of respect for Elijah Brooks. But now that Elijah was dead, the sharks would be circling. And here was the kicker. I opened the corporate governance documents. 6 months ago, Dante had signed a restructuring agreement to get a fast cash injection to pay for Tiffany's remodel of their kitchen. In that agreement, buried in the fine print on page 42, was a clause called a personal guarantee. In order to get the loan, Dante had pledged his personal assets and assumed full personal liability for the company debt. He had pierced the corporate veil. He had signed his life away for a marble countertop. If he took over the company as CEO, if he accepted the inheritance, he was not just accepting the assets, he was accepting the debt. The creditors would not just take the company, they would take his house, his car, his watch, and the clothes off Tiffany's back. I sat in the silence of my penthouse, the only sound the hum of the hard drives. My father knew. That was why he laughed in the video. That was why he looked at the camera with that twinkle in his eye. He was not being cruel. He was letting them hang themselves. He knew that their greed would blind them to due diligence. He knew Tiffany would be so desperate to grab the crown she would never check to see if it was made of gold or lead. He had set a trap, a $500 million mousetrap, and he had left me the trigger. I could warn them. The thought crossed my mind for a fleeting second. I could call Dante right now. I could tell him to walk away. I could tell him to renounce the inheritance, to refuse the position of CEO. If he walked away now, the banks would seize the company, but he would be free. He would be broke, but he would not be in debt for $500 million. Then I looked at the invoice on my desk. The $50,000 bill for the funeral they would not let me participate in. I thought about my mother sitting in that cafe demanding my life savings to pay for her bracelet. I thought about Tiffany standing on the balcony of my childhood home, wearing my mother's coat, telling me I was trash. They wanted the legacy. They wanted the name. They wanted the power. Who was I to deny them their dream? I picked up my phone and dialed Mr. Sterling. It was late, but I knew he would be awake. Lawyers like us did not sleep when there was blood in the water. Sterling answered on the first ring. Zara, you have seen the files. I have seen them. Sterling, I said, my voice steady. It is worse than I thought. Dante has embezzled nearly $10 million in operating capital over the last 3 years alone. And the personal guarantee clause is watertight. It is Sterling confirmed. Your father tried to stop him. He tried to warn Dante about the spending. But Dante would not listen. He said the old man did not understand modern business, so Elijah let him sign. He said if the boy wants to play with fire, let him hold the matches. The silence stretched between us for a moment. So what is the play? Zara Sterling asked. Do we intervene? Do we declare bankruptcy before the transfer? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. I saw the reflection of a woman who had been underestimated her entire life. A woman who had been told she was worthless while she secretly paid the bills. A woman who had been kicked out of her own family. No, I said, no intervention. We proceed as planned. Are you sure? Sterling asked, his tone cautious. Once they sign the acceptance papers at the reading next week, there is no turning back. The creditors are already lining up. I have been holding them off with personal favors, but the second Dante becomes CEO, the dam breaks. They will lose everything, Zara, not just the company. The houses, the cars, their personal savings. It will be total ruin. I pressed my hand against the cold glass of the window. My father left them a choice, Sterling. He gave them 7 days. 7 days to be humble. 7 days to ask for help. 7 days to treat me like a human being. I turned back to the glowing screens, the red numbers reflecting in my eyes. Instead, they sent me an invoice. They changed the locks. They chose greed. So let them have it. Let them have the company. Let them have the title. Let them have the $500 million. And let them have the debt that comes with it. I will prepare the papers, Sterling said. I could hear the grim satisfaction in his voice. He had watched them disrespect his friend Elijah for years. He was ready too. One more thing, Sterling, I added. Yes, the banks, the ones holding the primary notes on the Empire Stone debt, the ones who are about to foreclose. Yes, tell them I am ready to buy. There was a pause on the line and then a soft chuckle from the old lawyer. You are going to buy the debt. I am going to buy it all, Sterling. When the company collapses, I want to be the one holding the keys. I do not just want to see them fall, I want to own the pavement they hit. Understood, Sterling said. I will set up the meeting with the risk officers tomorrow morning. Good night, Zara. Or should I say, Madam CEO. I hung up the phone. I looked at the red numbers one last time. The trap was set, the cheese was in place, and my brother and his wife were running toward it with their mouths wide open. I closed the file and turned off the monitors. The room plunged into darkness save for the city lights. My father had left them a joke. I was going to deliver the punchline. The morning sun hit the glass facade of the Empire Stone headquarters in downtown Chicago, but it brought no warmth. I parked my modest sedan 2 blocks away and walked the rest of the distance. I did not want them to see my car. I did not want them to see me coming. I adjusted the collar of my coat and checked the file folder in my bag one last time. Inside was a single document. It was a standard-looking legal agreement, roughly 10 pages long, dense with jargon and boilerplate text. To the untrained eye, it looked like administrative boredom. To me, it looked like a guillotine. I walked into the lobby. For 30 years, this building had run like a Swiss watch. My father insisted on professionalism. The floors were always polished, the security guards always knew your name, and the reception desk was always manned by Mrs. Higgins, a woman who had been with the company since before I was born. Today, the lobby was chaos. Mrs. Higgins was gone. Her desk was occupied by a young woman with bright pink nails who was chewing gum and scrolling through her phone. She did not even look up when I approached the turnstiles. 2 men in moving uniforms were wheeling a massive modern art sculpture toward the elevators. It was a hideous, twisted piece of metal that looked like a car crash. I recognized the artist. It was one of Tiffany's favorites. She was redecorating the lobby before she even owned the building. I swiped my old access badge. It still worked. That was their first mistake. They were so focused on the house, they forgot the corporate security protocols. I took the elevator to the top floor, the executive suite. The hallway was lined with portraits of the company's projects over the decades: bridges, hospitals, skyscrapers. My father's legacy. I could hear Tiffany's voice echoing down the corridor before the elevator doors even closed behind me. I want that wall gone, she was shouting. It blocks the view. And get rid of these old chairs. They smell like cigars and old men. I want white leather. I want everything white. I walked into the reception area of the CEO office. It was a slaughterhouse. Boxes were stacked everywhere. Not boxes of files, but boxes of personal belongings. My father's things. His awards, his framed photos of the groundbreaking ceremonies, his collection of antique hard hats. They were all tossed haphazardly into cardboard bins labeled trash. Sitting behind the executive assistant desk was not Clara, the woman who managed my father's schedule for 20 years. Instead, there was a girl I recognized from Tiffany's Instagram stories. She was wearing headphones and bobbing her head to music, ignoring the phones that were ringing off the hook. I walked past her and pushed open the double doors to my father's office. Dante was sitting in the big leather chair. He looked small in it. He was spinning a pen in his fingers, staring blankly at a spreadsheet on the desk. He looked terrified. Tiffany was standing by the window holding a fabric swatch against the curtains. She turned when I entered and her face twisted into a sneer. "Security," she yelled. "How did you get in here?" I walked calm and steady to the center of the room. I ignored her and looked at Dante. "Hello, brother. Playing boss, I see." Dante stopped spinning the pen. "Zara, what are you doing here? We told you. You are out. The company is ours. Dad said so. He said you have provisional control," I corrected. "But you do not have signatory power yet. The banks have frozen the operating accounts until the probate hearing next week." Tiffany stomped over to the desk. "We know that. We are handling it. We have our own money." I laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. "No, you do not, Tiffany. You have credit cards and a leased Bentley. You do not have payroll for 300 employees, and payroll is due on Friday." Dante's face went pale. He looked at the spreadsheet again. "Is that true? Is payroll Friday?" I sat down in one of the guest chairs, the ones Tiffany wanted to throw out. They were comfortable. They felt like power. "Yes, Dante. And since the accounts are frozen, you cannot pay them. If you miss payroll, the unions will strike on Monday. The construction sites will shut down. The penalties on the city contracts will trigger. You will lose $10 million in fines by Wednesday." Panic flared in Dante's eyes. He looked at Tiffany. "Babe, you said we had access. You said we could write checks." "I thought we could," Tiffany snapped. "It is his fault. He set this up to embarrass us. Even dead, he is trying to control us." She turned to me, her eyes narrowing. "Why are you here, Zara? To gloat? To watch us fail?" "No," I said. I pulled the file folder from my bag. "I am here because despite everything, he was my father too. And I do not want to see his company burn to the ground because you two cannot figure out how to unlock a bank account." I slid the document across the desk. "This is a temporary management transfer agreement. Sterling drew it up this morning." Dante looked at it suspiciously. "What does it do?" "It bridges the gap," I explained. "It is a standard corporate instrument. It grants the interim executives, that is you two, immediate emergency signatory power. If you sign this, the bank will unlock the operating accounts today. You can pay the staff, you can keep the lights on, you can buy your white leather chairs." Tiffany snatched the document from the desk. She flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the text, without understanding a word of it. "What is the catch?" she asked. "You would not help us. You hate us. I do not hate the company," I lied smoothly. "And frankly, I do not want to deal with the unions calling me. If you do not sign this, the board will appoint an emergency trustee. Likely me, since I have a background in crisis management. I will run the company for the next 6 months while the courts sort out the probate." I leaned back and crossed my legs. "But if you sign it, you are in charge. Immediately. No trustee. No oversight. Just you two and the $500 million. Tiffany looked at Dante. Her greed was warring with her suspicion. But the idea of me running the company, the idea of me having power over her, was intolerable. "We sign it," she said. "We sign it right now." Dante hesitated. "Should we show this to a lawyer?" Tiffany hit him on the arm. "Are you stupid, Dante? If we wait for a lawyer, we miss payroll. The unions strike. We look incompetent. Do you want the board to think you cannot handle this? Do you want Zara to take over?" She looked at me with a triumphant smirk. "Give me a pen." She grabbed a gold pen from my father's desk set. She flipped to the last page. She signed her name with a flourish, "Tiffany Brooks, Co-CEO." Then she shoved the paper at Dante. "Sign it. Be a man." Dante looked at me one last time. He was looking for a lifeline. He was looking for his big sister to tell him to stop, to tell him it was a trick. But I just looked back at him, my face a mask of indifference. I remembered the invoice. I remembered the snow on my teddy bear. I remembered him throwing my suitcase down the stairs. "Sign it, Dante," I said softly. "It is what you always wanted. Total control." He picked up the pen. He signed. I watched the ink dry. It was done. They had just signed the death warrant of their financial lives. Because buried in paragraph 14, section C, subsection 2, was a clause that I had drafted myself. It was a masterpiece of legal lethality. The clause stated that by accepting immediate signatory power, the interim managers agreed to assume full unlimited personal liability for all existing and future debts of the corporation in order to secure the continued solvency of the entity. They had just bypassed the corporate veil. Usually, a CEO is not personally responsible for a company's debts. If the company goes bankrupt, the CEO walks away. But by signing this specific agreement, they had voluntarily pledged their personal assets as collateral for Empire Stone's massive debt. They thought they were unlocking a bank account. They were actually chaining themselves to the Titanic. I took the document back and slid it into my bag. "Excellent," I said, standing up. "I will file this with the bank immediately. You should have access by 2 this afternoon." Tiffany walked around the desk and sat in my father's chair. She spun around, testing it out. "Good," she said, dismissing me. "Now get out. We have work to do. I need to fire the CFO." He gave me a dirty look in the elevator. "And I want to hire my friend Candy as the new director of marketing. She has great taste in shoes." "You are firing the CFO?" I asked. "The man who has kept the books balanced for a decade." "He is old energy," Tiffany said, waving her hand. "We are bringing in fresh blood. Candy is a party planner. She knows how to throw an event. We are going to rebrand. Empire Stone is going to be sexy." She looked at Dante. "Honey, call the dealership. Tell them we want the fleet of Range Rovers delivered tomorrow. Black ones. Matte finish." Dante picked up the phone, his chest puffed out. He felt like a king. I walked to the door. I paused and looked back at them. Tiffany was already browsing a furniture catalog. Dante was yelling at someone on the phone, demanding cars he could not pay for. They were looting a burning house. "Goodbye, Dante," I said. He did not even look up. I walked out past the girl with the headphones, past the boxes of my father's life sitting in the trash. I took the elevator down. When I stepped out into the cold Chicago air, I pulled out my phone. I called Sterling. "They signed," I said. "Good Lord," Sterling breathed. "They did not even read it." "They did not read a word." "File it, Sterling. And then call the creditors. Tell them the new guarantors have assumed liability. Tell them they can go after the personal assets starting Monday." I hung up. I walked to my car. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not joy. It was not happiness. It was the cold, heavy satisfaction of a job well done. I was the cleaner. And I had just scrubbed them out. But the game was not over yet. There was one more card to play. One more layer of the onion to peel back. I needed to know about the baby. Tiffany had been flaunting that baby bump for months. She used it as a shield and a weapon. She claimed it was the heir to the dynasty. But I had noticed something. At the funeral, when she pushed past me, she moved easily, too easily for someone who claimed to be 6 months pregnant. And earlier in the office, when she leaned over the desk to sign the death warrant, she pressed her stomach right against the edge. She did not flinch. She did not protect it. I sat in my car and drummed my fingers on the steering wheel. I pulled up my contact list. I scrolled past the lawyers and the bankers and the corporate fixers. I found a number I had not used in a long time. It was a private investigator named Marcus. He was expensive, he was discreet, and he could find dirt in a desert. I hit dial. "Marcus," I said when he answered. "It is Zara. I have a job for you. Name it." "Tiffany Brooks. My sister-in-law. She claims she is pregnant. I want to know if it is true. I want medical records. I want pharmacy receipts. I want to know if she has bought any prosthetics online, and I want it by tomorrow." "Consider it done," Marcus said. I hung up and started the car. If the baby was fake, then the last shred of protection she had, the last bit of sympathy my mother held for her, would vanish. If there was no heir, there was no dynasty. And if she had lied about the baby to get the money, then she was not just greedy. She was a monster. I drove back toward the Sovereign building. The city was waking up. People were going to work oblivious to the war that was happening in the high-rise offices above them. I was going to destroy them. I was going to take it all. And I was going to enjoy it. The brown envelope Marcus slid across the glass table of the coffee shop was thin. Too thin, I thought, for a scandal that was supposed to secure a $500 million fortune. I picked it up, feeling the weight of the paper stock. It was light, but it held enough explosive power to level a city block. Marcus sat opposite me, sipping an espresso. He did not look like a private investigator. He looked like a weary accountant or a high school history teacher. That was his gift. He blended in. He was the furniture in the room that you forgot was there until it started recording your conversation. "You are going to want to sit down for this one, Zara," he said quietly. "I mean really sit down." "I am sitting, Marcus. Just tell me, is she pregnant?" Marcus tapped the envelope. "Open it." I undid the clasp and slid the contents out. The first photo was grainy, but clear enough. It showed Tiffany standing on the front porch of her townhouse, accepting a package from a delivery driver. The box was large and marked with a distinctive purple logo. I recognized the logo. It was not a baby store. It was not a medical supply company. It was a theatrical prop house in Los Angeles, a company that specialized in high-end prosthetics for film and television. I flipped to the next page. It was a printout of an invoice intercepted from Tiffany's personal email. The item description was clinical and horrifying. 1 silicone gestational abdomen, 2nd trimester, custom skin tone match, adhesive backing, price $1,200. She bought a baby bump. I whispered, the absurdity of it catching in my throat. "She bought 3, Marcus corrected. "1st, 2nd, and 3rd trimester. She is planning the whole arc. And look at the date on the invoice." I looked. The purchase was made 2 days before my father went into the hospital for the last time. She knew he was dying. She knew the will reading was coming. She needed an ace in the hole. She needed leverage that my mother Beatrice could not resist. "There is no baby," Marcus said. I checked her medical records, or rather, the lack of them. She has not seen an obstetrician in 5 years. The ultrasound she posted on Facebook. "The one your mom framed and put on the mantle. It is a stock photo, Zara. I found the original on a medical image database. It costs $15 to download without the watermark." I stared at the stock photo of the fetus. My nephew, the heir to Empire Stone. He was a JPEG file downloaded by a woman desperate for a payday. It was diabolical. It was the kind of long con that required a sociopathic level of detachment. She was looking my mother in the eye every single day, letting Beatrice touch a piece of rubber strapped to her stomach and crying tears of joy over a lie. Why, I asked. Why fake it? Why not just get pregnant for real? Marcus shrugged. Maybe she cannot. Maybe Dante cannot. Or maybe she just did not want to ruin her figure for a gamble. A fake baby is easier to manage. If the money does not come through, she can just have a tragic miscarriage. It garners sympathy, and it exits the lie cleanly. I felt a cold fury rising in my blood. My mother was already picking out names. She was knitting blankets. She was building her entire future happiness around this child. Tiffany was not just stealing money. She was stealing hope. "Where is she now?" I asked, standing up. "Lunch," Marcus said, checking his watch. "The grill on Michigan Avenue. With your mother, celebrating the takeover." I threw a $100 bill on the table. "Keep the change, Marcus, and keep digging. I want to know who else is in on it." I walked out of the coffee shop and hailed a cab. The grill was one of those places where the waiters wore tuxedos, and the menu did not list prices. It was my mother's favorite spot to be seen. It was the perfect stage for Tiffany's performance. I walked into the restaurant 10 minutes later. The maitre d' tried to stop me, asking if I had a reservation. I ignored him and scanned the room. I saw them in a circular booth near the window. My mother looked radiant. She was laughing, holding a glass of champagne. Tiffany was sitting next to her wearing a white dress that draped loosely over her midsection. She had a hand resting protectively on the silicone bump. She looked the picture of maternal grace. I walked toward them, but I did not approach the table directly. I diverted to the bar, which had a clear line of sight. I ordered a sparkling water and watched. Tiffany was playing the part perfectly. She declined the wine list with a sad smile pointing to her belly. She made a show of ordering the salmon well done. She rubbed her lower back as if the weight of the non-existent child was straining her. My mother was eating it up. She was literally feeding Tiffany bites of dessert, cooing over her. It was repulsive. Then Tiffany stood up. She whispered something to my mother and headed toward the restrooms. I waited 5 seconds, then followed. The ladies' room at the grill was opulent with marble sinks and velvet settees. It was empty when I entered. I heard the sound of a stall door latching. I walked silently to the row of sinks and turned on the tap, letting the water run, to mask the sound of my footsteps. I watched the reflection of the stall doors in the mirror. Smoke began to curl up from under the door of the handicap stall. It was not the thin, wispy smoke of a cigarette. It was the thick, sweet-smelling cloud of a vape pen. Blue raspberry or cotton candy. I turned off the tap. The smoke continued to billow. Then I heard a sound that made my blood boil. The distinct crack and fizz of a mini liquor bottle being opened. The kind you get on airplanes or in hotel minibars. Tiffany was in there vaping and doing shots while wearing a fake pregnancy belly. I walked to the stall door. I did not knock. I kicked the bottom of the door hard. "Hey," Tiffany screeched from inside. "Occupied." "I know it is occupied, Tiffany," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Open the door." Silence. The smoke stopped abruptly. "Zara, is that you? Open the door or I climb over and open it myself." There was a shuffling sound, the clinking of glass against porcelain, then the lock slid back. The door swung open. Tiffany was standing there looking flustered. She had hidden the vape pen, but the smell was overwhelming. She had tried to hide the mini bottle of vodka, but I saw the cap on the floor. Her dress was slightly askew. And there it was. The seam where the prosthetic met her skin. It was high-quality work, I had to admit. The skin tone match was perfect, but it did not move like flesh. It sat there rigid and lifeless. "Well, well, well," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "Celebrating early, are we?" Tiffany straightened her spine, trying to regain her composure. "I felt sick, Zara. The baby is kicking. I came in here to compose myself." "The baby is kicking," I repeated. "That is amazing, Tiffany, considering the baby is made of silicone and foam. Does the manufacturer charge extra for the kicking feature?" Her face went white, then red, then a mask of pure venom slammed into place. "You are crazy," she hissed. "You are jealous because Dante chose me, because I am giving this family what you never could. An heir." I looked at the vodka cap on the floor. "Is that what you are feeding the heir, Tiffany? Kettle One and nicotine?" She stepped forward, getting in my face. "You tell anyone," she whispered, "and I will deny it. Mom will believe me. She wants to believe me. She thinks you are a bitter, barren spinster. Who is she going to trust? The mother of her grandchild, or the daughter who abandoned her?" It was a good point. My mother was desperate for this baby. If I went out there right now and tore the dress off Tiffany, my mother would probably accuse me of attacking a pregnant woman. She would rationalize the fake belly as a support garment. She would rationalize the drinking as stress. She was too deep in the delusion. I smiled. It was the same cold smile my father used in the video. "I am not going to tell anyone, Tiffany." She blinked, surprised. "You are not?" "No," I said. "I think you should enjoy your lunch." "I think you should enjoy being the center of attention." Tiffany narrowed her eyes. "What is the game, Zara? Why are you here?" I reached out and patted the silicone bump. It felt cold and hard under the fabric. I just wanted to say congratulations, I said. You really committed to the role. Just be careful. Lies have a way of growing faster than babies. I turned and walked out of the bathroom. As I exited, I heard her exhale a long, shaky breath. She thought she had won. She thought I was retreating because I was afraid of my mother's reaction. She was wrong. I walked back into the dining room. Tiffany emerged a moment later. She had fixed her dress and put her mask back on. She walked to the table, clutching her stomach, and made a show of swaying slightly. "Oh, Beatrice," she said loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "The morning sickness just comes and goes. It is so hard." My mother jumped up and guided her back to the seat, fussing over her. "Oh, you poor thing. Sit down. Do you need water? Do you need a pillow?" I watched from the bar. It was a masterclass in manipulation, and that was exactly why I could not expose her. Not yet. If I exposed the fake pregnancy now, the family would implode too early. My mother would be devastated, but she would forgive Dante. She would say Tiffany tricked him. She would circle the wagons. They would retreat, lick their wounds, and survive. They would still have the company. They would still have the assets. I needed them to be deeper in the hole. I needed Dante to be so committed to this lie that it buried him. I pulled out my phone and called Sterling. "Sterling," I said, keeping my eyes on the happy couple. "Change of plans. We do not block the access to the company credit lines yet." "Zara, are you sure?" Sterling asked. "They will drain the accounts." "Let them," I said. "In fact, I want you to approve the loan application Dante sent over this morning, the one for the new house, the mansion in Lincoln Park." Sterling asked, his voice incredulous. "That is a $5 million property, Zara. The interest rate is predatory. If they default on that, they lose everything." "Exactly," I said. "Tiffany needs a nursery, Sterling. She needs a palace for the prince that does not exist. She is going to push Dante to buy it. She is going to push him to sign every guarantee, every loan, every piece of paper you put in front of him because she needs to cement her status before the baby is supposed to arrive." I watched Tiffany point to a real estate listing on her phone, showing it to my mother. My mother clapped her hands in delight. "Let them buy the house," I told Sterling. "Let them buy the furniture. Let them buy the gold-plated crib. Let Dante sign his name on the dotted line. I want him so far in debt that he can never crawl out." "But the baby," Sterling said. "When there is no baby," "When there is no baby," I said, "the fake miscarriage will be the least of their problems. Because by then, the bank will own the house. And I will own the bank. Do it, Sterling. Approve the loan." I hung up the phone. I took one last look at Tiffany. She was glowing. She was drinking her water and basking in my mother's adoration. She thought the baby was her shield. She did not realize it was her anchor. She was going to use that fake pregnancy to drive my brother into the poorhouse. She was going to spend millions on a fantasy. And when the bill came due, she would have nothing to pay it with but silicone and lies. I finished my sparkling water and left the restaurant. The winter wind was picking up outside. A storm was coming, and Tiffany was dressed for summer. The bass from the sound system rattled the windows of the Kenwood estate before I even stepped out of my car. It was 7 in the evening, the night before the official reading of the will, and Tiffany was throwing a coronation party. She had not waited for the ink to dry. She had not waited for the judge to bang the gavel. She was celebrating her victory in advance, convinced that tomorrow morning would bring her a $500 million check. I walked up the driveway past a line of valet-parked luxury cars. The house my father built, the house that was supposed to be a sanctuary of dignity and history, had been transformed into a nightclub. Purple uplighting washed the brick facade. A red carpet had been rolled out over the stone steps. Security guards with earpieces stood at the door checking a guest list on iPads. I did not have an invitation. I did not need one. I owned the mortgage company that held the deed to this house. I walked straight past the security. One of the guards stepped forward to block me, but I simply held up my phone displaying a digital document. It was a property ownership affidavit. I suggest you step aside, I said, my voice low and pleasant. Unless you want to explain to your supervisor why you denied access to the landlord. The guard hesitated, looked at the document, then stepped back. He did not get paid enough to deal with legal disputes. I pushed open the heavy front doors and stepped into the foyer. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the smell of caterers heating up hors d'oeuvres. The transformation was horrifying. The antique Persian rugs were gone, replaced by white shag carpets. The oil paintings of my ancestors had been taken down, leaving lighter squares on the wallpaper. In their place, Tiffany had hung massive abstract prints that looked like spilled paint. The crowd was a mix of Chicago's social climbers, influencers, and hangers-on. People who had never met my father. People who would not have been allowed in his driveway when he was alive. They were drinking his vintage wine and laughing too loudly, desperate to be close to the new money. I moved through the crowd, a dark specter in a sea of sequins and tuxedos. I was wearing a simple charcoal business suit, tailored to perfection, but stark compared to the gala attire around me. I was not here to party. I was here to witness the height of their hubris before the fall. I found them in the grand ballroom. Tiffany was standing on a raised platform near the DJ booth. She was wearing a silver gown that clung to her fake baby bump, shimmering under the strobe lights. She held a microphone in one hand and a magnum of champagne in the other. Dante stood beside her, looking sweaty and glassy-eyed. He was wearing a white tuxedo that made him look like a waiter. My mother Beatrice sat on a velvet throne Tiffany must have rented, beaming at them like they were royalty. Tiffany spotted me. The music did not stop, but her smile twisted into a sneer. She tapped the microphone, sending a screech of feedback through the room. "Well, look who decided to show up," she announced, her voice amplified over the thumping bass. "Everyone quiet down. We have a celebrity guest." The music lowered. The room turned to look. Hundreds of eyes fixed on me. "It is Zara," she said, descending the stairs from the platform, with surprising agility for a pregnant woman. "The sister who ran away. The secretary who thinks she knows business." She walked right up to me, her entourage parting to let her through. She smelled of vodka and expensive lotion. She circled me, looking me up and down with exaggerated pity. "You know the dress code was black tie," she said into the microphone. "But I guess when you live on a budget, you wear what you have. Did you come for the free food, Zara? Or did you come to beg one last time before we sign the papers tomorrow?" The crowd laughed. It was a cruel, sycophantic sound. They did not know me, but they knew who was holding the champagne, so they laughed. I stood perfectly still. I did not flinch. I did not look away. I came to offer my congratulations. "Tiffany," I said, my voice calm, carrying clearly in the sudden quiet. "It is a bold move, throwing a victory party before the game is over." Tiffany laughed, tossing her head back. "The game is over, Zara. We won. Tomorrow morning, Sterling reads the will. We get the company, we get the accounts. We get the $500 million, and you get nothing." She stepped closer, invading my personal space. She gestured around the room with her free hand. "Look at this," she hissed away from the microphone so only I could hear. "This is my world now. These are my people. You do not belong here. You are a ghost, Zara. You are the past. Dante and I are the future. We are going to take your father's boring, dusty company and turn it into an empire. We are going to be billionaires." She raised the microphone again, addressing the room. "My sister-in-law, everyone," she shouted. "She is just jealous. She has spent her whole life looking in from the outside. And that is where she is going to stay, outside. Because tomorrow the locks change for good. Tomorrow this house, this money, this legacy, it is all ours. $500 million. Can you even imagine that kind of money, Zara?" I looked at Dante. He was avoiding my gaze, drinking heavily from a tumbler. He knew deep down that this was wrong. He knew he was unworthy, but he was too weak to stop the train. I looked at my mother. She was clapping her hands, urging the crowd to cheer for her son and his wife. She had chosen her side. She had bet everything on the golden child. I looked back at Tiffany. She was glowing with greed. She was high on the promise of wealth she had not earned. She truly believed she had won. She had no idea that the ground beneath her feet had already been sold. I smiled. It was a slow, cold smile that did not reach my eyes. It is a lot of money, Tiffany, I agreed. 500 million is a life-changing amount. It can buy a lot of things. It can buy a white tuxedo. It can buy a party full of strangers. It can even buy a silicone stomach if you know where to shop. Her eyes widened. She covered her mic with her hand. What did you say? She whispered. I ignored her. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a thick cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with red wax. It looked like a gift. It looked like a greeting card. But inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a copy of the UCC financing statement filed that morning. It detailed the transfer of the primary lien on Empire Stone. It showed that the debt holder was no longer the bank. The debt holder was Z Capital. I placed the envelope gently on a passing waiter's tray right next to a glass of champagne. I suggest you open that later, I said. Ideally when you are sober, but knowing you that might not happen. Tiffany swatted the envelope off the tray. It fluttered to the floor, landing near her silver heels. I do not want your trash, she spat. Get out of my house. I looked around the room one last time. I memorized the faces of the people laughing at me. I memorized the tacky decorations covering my father's work. I memorized the look of triumph on Tiffany's face. I wanted to remember it exactly as it was in this moment. Because this was the peak. This was the summit. And the drop on the other side was going to be vertical. You are right, Tiffany, I said. This is your night. You should enjoy it. Drink the wine. Dance with your friends. Celebrate the 500 million. I stepped closer to her and leaned in, my lips brushing her ear. Because tomorrow the sun is going to rise in the west. And when it does, you are going to realize that you are not standing on a mountain. You are standing on a trap door. I pulled back and looked her in the eye. Enjoy the party, sister-in-law. I turned and walked away. I did not rush. I walked with the steady rhythm of a clock ticking down. Behind me, I heard Tiffany screech something into the microphone, trying to regain the momentum, trying to get the crowd to laugh again. The music started back up, loud and chaotic, but I saw Dante watching me leave. He was not laughing. He was staring at the envelope on the floor. He looked pale. He looked like a man who just heard the first crack in the ice. I walked out of the house and down the steps. The cold air felt clean after the stifling atmosphere of the ballroom. I walked to my car, my heels clicking on the pavement. I sat in the driver's seat and looked up at the house. The windows were vibrating with the bass. They were dancing on the edge of the abyss. Tomorrow was the reading. Tomorrow Sterling would play the rest of the video. Tomorrow the debt would come due. I started the engine. I did not feel angry anymore. I felt efficient. The pieces were all in place. The investigation was complete. The trap was sprung. They wanted a show. I was going to give them a finale they would never forget. I drove away, leaving the lights and the noise behind me. I went home to my silent, pristine penthouse. I poured myself a glass of water. I stood by the window and looked out at the city. Sleep well, Tiffany, I whispered to the glass. You are going to need the rest. The conference room at Sterling & Associates was located on the 50th floor, wrapped in floor-to-ceiling glass that offered a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline. It was a room designed to intimidate. The table was a long slab of polished mahogany that looked like an aircraft carrier. The leather chairs cost more than most cars. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that kept everyone awake and slightly uncomfortable. It was 10 in the morning, but Dante and Tiffany looked like they had just stumbled out of a nightclub at 3 a.m. I sat at the far end of the table, my back to the window. I wore a simple black dress and my hair was pulled back in a severe bun. I had a single file folder in front of me and a bottle of water. I was the picture of composure. Across from me, my family was a mess. Dante was still wearing the white tuxedo from the party the night before. The jacket was stained with wine, and the collar was unbuttoned. He smelled of stale champagne and desperation. His eyes were bloodshot, and he kept rubbing his temples. Tiffany was wearing oversized sunglasses indoors, trying to hide the bags under her eyes. She wore a bright pink dress that was entirely inappropriate for a legal proceeding, but perfect for the victory lap she thought she was taking. My mother Beatrice sat between them, clutching a rosary beads in one hand and Tiffany's hand in the other. She looked terrified and hopeful all at once. But we were not alone. Lining the back wall of the conference room, sitting in a row of chairs like a jury of executioners, were 6 men and women in gray suits. They had briefcases on their laps and faces made of stone. They did not speak. They did not check their phones. They just watched. "Who are they?" Tiffany asked, pointing a manicured finger at the row of strangers. "Why are there so many people here? This is a private family matter." Mr. Sterling stood at the head of the table. He was impeccable as always, his silver hair combed back, his suit pressed to razor sharpness. He did not look at Tiffany. He looked at his watch. "These individuals represent various interested parties regarding the assets and liabilities of Empire Stone Sterling," said, his voice smooth. "They are here to ensure the transition of power is handled in accordance with all contractual obligations." "Liabilities," Tiffany scoffed. She took off her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were glassy and hard. "We are here for the assets, Sterling. We are here for the money. Just read the paper so we can get out of here. I have a spa appointment at noon." She looked at me and sneered. "And why is she here? Dad said she was out." "She is a beneficiary of the estate," Sterling said. "She has a right to be present. Now if everyone is seated, we will proceed." He pressed a button on a remote control. A large screen descended from the ceiling at the other end of the room. The lights dimmed automatically. The hum of the projector was the only sound in the room. The screen flickered to life. It was my father again. Elijah Brooks. He was sitting in the same leather chair in his study, wearing the same navy suit, holding the same glass of dark liquor. But the lighting was different. It was darker, more intimate. He looked tired. He looked like a man who knew he was running out of time. He took a sip of his drink and set the glass down on the side table with a heavy thud. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and clasped his hands together. He looked directly into the camera. "Hello again," he said. "If you are watching this, it has been 7 days since my funeral. 7 days since I gave you a challenge." Dante shifted in his seat. He looked like he wanted to vomit. My mother squeezed his hand so hard her knuckles turned white. "I wonder how you spent those 7 days," my father mused on the screen. "Did you mourn me? Did you reflect on the responsibility of the legacy I built? Or did you throw a party? Did you buy cars you cannot afford? Did you measure the office for new curtains?" Tiffany rolled her eyes. "Oh, get on with it, old man," she muttered. My father paused as if he could hear her. "I built Empire Stone from nothing." He continued, his voice gaining strength. "I started with a shovel and a pickup truck. I mixed concrete with my own hands. I fought the unions, I fought the city, I fought the banks. I built this city brick by brick. And I did it so my family would never have to struggle the way I did." He looked at Dante. "Dante, my son. You always wanted to be the big man. You wanted the respect. You wanted to walk into a room and have people fear you. You thought the respect came from the suit. You thought it came from the name. You never understood that respect comes from the work. You were always looking for the shortcut." Dante looked down at the table, avoiding his father's digital gaze. "And Tiffany," my father said, shifting his focus, "you always wanted the lifestyle. You wanted the gold card. You wanted the status. You looked at my company and you saw a piggy bank. You never saw the sweat. You never saw the risk. You just saw the zeros in the bank account." He picked up his cigar and lit it, taking a long, slow drag. The smoke curled around his head like a halo. "But a father loves his children," he said, "even the disappointing ones. And a father wants to give his children what they want." The room went very still. I could hear Dante breathing ragged and shallow. "You want the company," he said. "You want the power. You want the $500 million valuation." He smiled. It was a sad smile. A smile of resignation. Very well. I give it to you. Tiffany sat up straighter. Her eyes widened. I, Elijah Brooks, being of sound mind and body, hereby bequeath 100% of the controlling stock and ownership of Empire Stone Construction and all its subsidiaries to my son Dante Brooks and his wife Tiffany Brooks. The air in the room exploded. Yes, Tiffany screamed, jumping out of her chair. She threw her hands in the air. Yes, we did it. I told you, Dante. I told you he would cave. Dante let out a sob of relief. He slumped forward onto the table, burying his face in his arms. It is ours, he wept. It is finally ours. My mother burst into tears. Praise Jesus, she cried, rocking back and forth. My boy, my sweet boy. He is the CEO. The legacy is safe. Oh, Elijah, thank you. Thank you for doing the right thing. Tiffany grabbed Dante by the shoulders and shook him. Get up, baby. We are rich. We are billionaires. We own it all. She turned to the row of suits in the back of the room. Did you hear that she shouted at them? It is ours. 100%. You work for us now, all of you. The suits did not move. They did not smile. They just watched her with cold, shark-like eyes. Tiffany spun around to face me. She strutted down the length of the table, her heels clicking on the hardwood. She stopped right in front of me and leaned down, her face inches from mine. She smelled of stale alcohol and expensive perfume. Well, Zara, she said, a cruel smile stretching across her face. What do you have to say now? I looked at her calmly. I took a sip of my water. I said nothing. Cat got your tongue, she taunted. You thought you were so smart. You thought you could intimidate us with your little legal threats. You thought you could scare us with your fake invoices. But look who won. Daddy chose us. He chose the real family. He chose the heir. She patted her fake baby bump. He left it all to us, Zara. The buildings, the accounts, the $500 million. And you know what he left you? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. You are trash, Zara. You are just the help. Maybe if you beg, I will let you keep your little job in the city. Or maybe I will just buy the building you live in and evict you for sport. She laughed, and it was a manic, high-pitched sound. Dante stood up, wiping his eyes. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and arrogance. I am sorry it had to be this way, Zara, he said, his voice shaky but trying to be firm. But business is business. You walked away. You made your choice. Mom looked at me from across the table. Her eyes were wet, but there was a hardness in them. A vindication. Your father knew best, she said. He knew Dante needed this. He knew you could take care of yourself, Zara. You have always been so independent. This is fair. This is how it should be. I looked at them. The three of them bonded by greed and delusion. They were so happy. They were so relieved. They thought the finish line was a ribbon they could cut. They did not see the cliff. Tiffany walked back to the head of the table. She stood next to Sterling and tapped on the desk. Okay, Sterling, give us the papers, she demanded. We want to sign. We want access to the accounts immediately. I have a shopping list a mile long. Sterling did not move. He stood there like a statue, his hand resting on a thick stack of documents. He looked at Tiffany, then at Dante, then at my mother. His expression was not one of congratulations. It was one of pity. He picked up a heavy wooden gavel that sat on the desk. He lifted it high and brought it down with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. The sound echoed through the room, silencing Tiffany's demands and my mother's prayers. Order, Sterling barked, his voice cutting through the celebration like a knife. Sit down, Mrs. Brooks. Sit down, Mr. Brooks. Tiffany glared at him. Don not tell me what to do. I am the owner of this company. I fire you. You can fire me when the proceedings are concluded. Sterling said, his voice icy. But right now you will sit down and you will be quiet. Because the video is not finished. What do you mean it is not finished? Dante asked, his face going pale again. He said he gave us the company. He said 100%. He did, Sterling said. But every gift comes with a price, Dante. And your father was a man who believed in balance. He pressed the button on the remote again. The screen flickered. My father was still there. He had not moved. But his expression had changed. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. He looked like a judge passing a life sentence. "Sit down, Tiffany," my father commanded from the screen. Tiffany sat. She looked nervous again. Her hands fluttered to her throat. "I have given you the assets," my father said. "I have given you the kingdom." But a kingdom is not just a crown. It is also a fortress. And sometimes fortresses are under siege. He took a sip of his drink. "I mentioned the $500 million in assets, and that is true. The buildings, the land, the equipment, it is all worth $500 million. But you never asked about the other side of the ledger, did you? You never asked about the cost of doing business." My father leaned forward. "You see, Dante, for the last 5 years you have been robbing me blind. You thought I did not know about the shell companies. You thought I did not know about the cars and the vacations and the jewelry. You drained the operating capital. You bled the accounts dry." Dante sank lower in his chair. Beatrice looked at him shocked. "Dante, what is he talking about?" "It is a lie," Dante whispered. "He is confused." "It is not a lie," my father roared from the screen, making everyone jump. "I watched every penny leave the accounts. I let you do it because I wanted to see how far you would go. I wanted to see if you would ever stop. But you never stopped. You just took and took and took." He paused, regaining his composure. "Because of your theft and because of the market downturn, Empire Stone is not just an asset. It is a liability, a massive liability." He picked up a piece of paper from his desk in the video. "As of this recording, Empire Stone owes $520 million to various creditors' banks and private equity firms. The company is underwater. It is technically insolvent." Tiffany gasped. $520 million, she screeched. "That is impossible." "It is very possible," my father said. "And here is the best part. The part that makes this a true family legacy." He smiled. It was the smile of the wolf. Usually, when a company goes broke, the owner can walk away. They declare corporate bankruptcy and they keep their personal wealth. That is the corporate veil. But 6 months ago, Dante, you signed a restructuring agreement to get quick cash. Do you remember that?" Dante was shaking his head back and forth, his eyes wide with terror. "In that agreement," my father said, savoring the words, "you signed a personal guarantee. You pledged your own assets, your house, your car, your future earnings. You pledged everything you own and everything you will ever own to cover the company debt." My father raised his glass in a mock toast. "So congratulations. I leave you the company. And with it, I leave you the debt. You are not inheriting a fortune, Dante. You are inheriting a bill, a $520 million bill, and it is due today." The screen went black. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Then, from the back of the room, one of the suits stood up. He walked to the table and placed a red folder in front of Dante. "Mr. Brooks," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "My name is Mr. Henderson. I represent the consortium of lenders. Based on the admission of insolvency and the transfer of ownership, we are hereby calling in the loans. The full amount is due immediately." He placed another folder in front of Tiffany. "And since you, Mrs. Brooks, signed the temporary management agreement yesterday assuming joint liability, we are also freezing your personal assets effective immediately." Tiffany looked at the folder. She looked at Dante. She looked at Sterling. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Sterling looked at me. He nodded once. "It is time, Zara," he said. I stood up. I smoothed my dress. I picked up my water bottle. "Wait!" Tiffany screamed. "Wait! This is a mistake. We did not know. We can fix this. We can sell the assets. We can pay it off." Mr. Henderson shook his head. "The assets have already been leveraged, Mrs. Brooks. You cannot sell what you do not own. The bank owns the equipment. The bank owns the land. and now the bank owns you. Unless Sterling interrupted, his voice cutting through the panic. Unless there is a white knight, someone willing to buy the debt, someone willing to bail you out. Tiffany looked around the room wild-eyed. Who would do that? It is $500 million. Sterling turned and looked at me. There is one person, he said. One entity that holds the primary position. He gestured to me. Zara. I walked to the head of the table. I stood next to Sterling. I looked down at my brother and his wife. They looked small. They looked broken. Hello, family, I said. I opened my file folder. I pulled out a single document. It was the deed to the Empire Stone headquarters. You wanted to know what I do for a living, Tiffany, I asked. I am a cleaner. I buy broken things. I buy trash. And 5 years ago, when Dante started stealing, I started buying. I threw the deed onto the table. It landed in front of Dante. I bought the debt, Dante. Every loan, every lien, every mortgage. I bought it all through my company Z Capital. I leaned over the table. I am the bank, Dante. I am the creditor. And I am here to collect. Sterling lowered the remote, but the screen did not go dark. The image of my father flickered and then steadied. He was no longer leaning back in his chair. He was sitting on the edge of it, his eyes boring into the lens, his face stripped of all humor. The atmosphere in the conference room shifted from a party to a funeral in the span of a single heartbeat. Tiffany was still standing, her hands gripping the edge of the mahogany table, her knuckles white. Dante was slumped in his chair, a look of dawning horror slowly replacing the relief on his face. My mother Beatrice looked between them, her smile faltering like a candle in a draught. The silence was absolute. We were all trapped in the gravity of the dead man's stare. However, my father said from the screen, his voice dropping to a register that vibrated in my chest. There is a reason I laughed. There is a reason I called this a game. You see, I gave you the company, I gave you the name, I gave you the legacy. But I am a man of transparency, and I am compelled to disclose the true state of the kingdom you fought so hard to conquer. He picked up a thick stack of papers from his desk in the video. He riffled through them, the sound loud and crisp through the speakers. You see the $500 million valuation you love to quote, Tiffany? That is the gross asset value. That is what the buildings and the machines and the land are worth if you sold them today. But you never asked about the other column, did you? You never asked about the liabilities. Tiffany looked at Dante. Her eyes were wide, darting back and forth. What is he talking about, Dante? What liabilities? Dante did not answer. He was staring at the screen, mesmerized by his own destruction. Empire Stone is not just an asset, my father continued, his voice becoming a hammer blow. It is a debtor, a massive hemorrhaging debtor. Due to years of mismanagement, due to the siphoning of operational funds for personal use, and due to a series of high-risk loans taken out to cover those thefts, the company is currently carrying a debt load of $520 million. Tiffany screamed. It was a short, sharp sound like a bird flying into a window. 520 million. The company is underwater, my father said calmly. It is technically insolvent. The moment you accepted ownership, the moment you signed those papers to become the CEOs, you did not just inherit the assets, you inherited the debt. You are now the captains of a sinking ship. No, Tiffany yelled. No, that is a lie. We can sell the assets. We can sell the buildings. We can pay it off. My father shook his head on the screen as if he were in the room with us. You cannot sell them, he said, because they are already leveraged. Every brick, every bulldozer, every acre of land has a lien on it. The banks own the assets. You own nothing but the obligation to pay. And here's the final nail, my father said, leaning so close to the camera, his face filled the screen. 6 months ago, Dante, you signed a restructuring agreement to get quick cash, to pay for your lifestyle, to pay for Tiffany's renovations. In that agreement, You signed a personal guarantee. Dante let out a low moan. He covered his face with his hands. And Tiffany, my father continued, his eyes shifting as if he could see her standing there. I know you. I know you would never let Dante sign something without putting your name on it too. I know you demanded to be a part of every decision. And I know that yesterday, in your desperation to take control, you signed the temporary management agreement that Zara brought you. Tiffany froze. She looked at me. I sat perfectly still, my face a mask of calm. That agreement, my father said, contained a clause that transferred full unlimited personal liability to the signatories. By signing that paper, you pierce the corporate veil. You bypass the protection of the LLC. You are personally responsible for the $520 million. The video cut to black. The room was silent for a second, and then chaos erupted. Liar Tiffany shrieked. She lunged toward the screen as if she could physically attack the recording. He is lying. The company is rich. We have buildings. We have equipment. I saw them. I saw the trucks. She spun around to face Sterling. Tell him he is lying. Tell him we are rich. Sterling stood calmly at the head of the table. He did not flinch. He adjusted his cuffs and looked at her with the dispassionate gaze of a coroner. I am afraid it is entirely accurate, Mrs. Brooks Sterling said. The physical assets, you see the headquarters, the machinery, the land, they were sold 5 years ago. Sold? Tiffany whispered, her voice trembling. Sold and leased back, Sterling explained. To cover Mr. Brooks' gambling debts and the embezzlement funds. The company pays rent on its own headquarters. The equipment is leased. The patents were liquidated. He opened a file on the table. You have inherited a shell company, Mrs. Brooks. A brand name attached to a mountain of debt. And because you signed the personal guarantee yesterday, you have pledged your own assets to cover it. Your house, your cars, your savings, even your future wages. It all belongs to the creditors now. Dante slid out of his chair and fell to his knees. He was sobbing loudly now, a pathetic sound that echoed off the glass walls. Mom, he wailed. Mom, do something. Beatrice looked at him in horror. She looked at Tiffany. She looked at me. Her world was collapsing. Her golden boy was not a king. He was a beggar. You tricked us! Tiffany screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. You knew. You brought that paper. You made us sign it. I did not make you do anything, Tiffany. I said, my voice cool and steady. I offered you a choice. I told you it was a temporary management agreement. You were the one who refused to read it. You were the one who was in such a rush to fire the staff and buy white leather chairs. You were so blinded by greed, you put a noose around your own neck and asked me to pull the lever. She lunged at me, her fingers curled into claws. You bitch, she screamed. I will kill you. Before she could take 2 steps, the suits in the back of the room stood up in unison. The movement was synchronized and terrifying. Sit down, Mrs. Brooks, one of them barked. It was Mr. Henderson, the lead creditor. He walked to the table and slammed a stack of documents down in front of Tiffany. My name is Henderson, he said, his voice hard as granite. I represent the consortium of banks holding the primary debt for Empire Stone. Since you have admitted to ownership, and since you have executed the personal guarantee, we are moving to immediate collections. He slid a paper toward her. This is a writ of attachment, he said. It freezes all your personal bank accounts effective immediately. Your credit cards have been canceled. Your cars have been flagged for repossession. He slid another paper toward Dante. This is a notice of foreclosure on your personal residence in Lincoln Park. The bank is seizing the property to satisfy a portion of the debt. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. Dante looked up from the floor, his face wet with tears and snot. You cannot take my house, he blubbered. I have a baby coming. Mr. Henderson looked at him with zero sympathy. You owe $500 million, Mr. Brooks. We can take your house. We can take your furniture. We can take the watch off your wrist. In fact, hand it over. Dante clutched his wrist, protecting the Rolex he had bought with stolen company funds. No, he whimpered. Hand it over, Henderson commanded. Or I will call the marshals waiting in the lobby and have you arrested for fraud right now. Dante shakily undid the clasp and handed the watch to the banker. Henderson dropped it into an evidence bag. Tiffany was hyperventilating. She grabbed my mother's arm, digging her nails into the fabric of my mother's dress. Beatrice, help us. Pay them. Use your savings. Use the insurance money. My mother looked at her terrified. I do not have it, she whispered. I spent it. I spent it on the wedding. I spent it on the house. I thought Dante would take care of me. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. Zara. Zara, please. You have money. You have a job. Help your brother. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had demanded $50,000 from me 3 days ago. The woman who had told me to empty my savings to pay for her bracelet. I do not have $50,000, Mom, I said, quoting her own words back to her. I am just a secretary. Remember, I have expenses. But you can fix this, she begged. You always fix things. Talk to them. Tell them it was a mistake. I looked at the bankers. I looked at Sterling. I looked at the wreckage of my family. There is no mistake, I said. This is accounting. This is the math finally adding up. Tiffany sank into a chair. She looked small and defeated. The arrogance was gone. The baby bump looked ridiculous now, a prop in a tragedy. What do we do? She whispered. You start walking, I said. Because they are going to tow your car in about 5 minutes. Sterling stepped forward. There is one final matter, he said. The video mentioned a solution. A white knight. Tiffany looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. A solution who? Sterling turned toward me. The debt has been purchased, he said. The primary note holder is no longer the bank consortium. The debt was sold this morning at a discount to a private equity firm. Who bought it? Dante asked, scrambling up from the floor. Who owns us? I stood up. I smoothed the front of my black dress. I picked up my file folder. I walked to the head of the table. I stood next to Sterling. I looked down at them. I did, I said. I opened the folder and pulled out the deed. I pulled out the transfer documents. I pulled out the ownership papers for Z Capital. I am Z Capital, I said. I bought the debt, Dante. I bought the loans. I bought the liens. I own the mortgage on your house. I own the lease on your car. I own the building we are standing in. I leaned over the table, my face inches from Tiffany's. I am the bank, Tiffany. And I am closing your account. You are Z Capital, Dante whispered. His voice was so quiet it barely registered over the hum of the air conditioning. He looked at me as if I had just grown a second head. He looked at his sister, the one he had ignored for a decade, the one he had mocked for being a secretary, and he tried to reconcile that image with the person who now held the deed to his life. I am Z Capital, I repeated. Z for Zara. It was not a very creative code name, I admit. But then again, I never thought I would have to use it against my own blood. I thought I would use it to build a legacy. Instead, I used it to buy a landfill. Tiffany laughed. It was a jagged, broken sound. You are lying. You are a receptionist, Zara. You fix coffee. You file papers. You do not have millions of dollars. You do not own private equity firms. This is a trick. Sterling put you up to this. She looked at Sterling, desperate for confirmation. Tell her, Sterling. Tell her she is crazy. Sterling did not look at her. He looked at me with a reverence that Tiffany would never understand. Ms. Brooks is one of the most successful crisis management consultants in the country, Mrs. Brooks Sterling said. Her net worth exceeds the gross valuation of Empire Stone by a significant margin. She does not fix coffee. She fixes corporations. And 5 years ago, when your husband started embezzling funds, she stepped in to prevent the banks from foreclosing then and there. I walked around the table. My heels sank into the plush carpet, the carpet I paid for. I stopped behind Dante's chair. He flinched as if I were going to hit him. I leaned down close to his ear. You stole $10 million, Dante, I said, soft and cold. You bought cars, you bought watches, you bought this suit, and every time you dipped your hand into the cookie jar, the bank noticed. They were going to seize the company 5 years ago. They were going to put Dad on the street. I straightened up and looked at my mother. She was staring at me, her mouth slightly open, her eyes wide with shock. She was seeing the daughter she threw away, and realizing that I was the only thing standing between her and the abyss. "I bought the debt, Mom," I said. "I bought the bad loans. I bought the liens. I paid 70 cents on the dollar because the banks knew the company was rotting from the inside. They were happy to unload the risk. They did not know the buyer was the owner's daughter. They just knew the check cleared." I looked back at Tiffany. "For 5 years I have been your landlord. I own the building we are standing in. I own the warehouse where the trucks are parked. I own the land under your house in Lincoln Park. Every time you renovated a kitchen, every time you bought a new sofa, you were doing it in a house that belonged to me." "No," Tiffany whispered, shaking her head. "No. That is my house. I picked out the drapes." "You picked out drapes for a cage," I said, "and now I am locking the door." I turned to Mr. Henderson, the creditor. "Execute the foreclosure," I said. Henderson nodded. "With pleasure, Ms. Brooks." He pulled a radio from his belt. "Secure the premises," he said into it. "Tow the vehicles. Change the codes." Tiffany jumped up. Her face was twisted with panic. "You cannot do this," she screamed. "I am pregnant. You are stressing the baby. You are hurting the air." She grabbed her stomach and doubled over, letting out a wail of pain. "Oh my God. My belly. It hurts. Dante, help me. Something is wrong with the baby. It was a good performance. If I did not know better, I might have called an ambulance." She sank to the floor, clutching her midsection, breathing in short, sharp gasps. "Mom, call 911, she cried. "I think I am losing it. The stress is too much. She is killing my baby." My mother jumped up, knocking her chair over. "Oh my God, Tiffany. Hold on, baby. Hold on. Someone call an ambulance." "Zara, look what you did. You are killing your nephew." Dante was paralyzed. He looked at Tiffany writhing on the floor, then at me. He did not know who to believe. I stood over her. I watched her act. It was pathetic. "Stop it, Tiffany," I said. She wailed louder. "You monster, you heartless bitch! You want my baby to die?" "Call 911, Beatrice screamed at me. "Do it now." I did not move. I reached into my file folder. I pulled out a single piece of paper. It was a receipt from a theatrical prop house in Los Angeles. "Get up, Tiffany," I said, my voice bored. "You are wrinkling your dress." She ignored me, sobbing louder. My mother was fumbling with her phone, trying to dial emergency services. I snatched the phone from my mother's hand. "She is not having a miscarriage, Mom," I said. Beatrice looked at me furious. "How dare you? She is in pain." "Look at her." I held up the receipt. I shoved it in front of my mother's face. "Look at this, Mom. Read it." Beatrice blinked her eyes, trying to focus through her tears. "One silicone gestational abdomen, second trimester. Custom match, $1,200. She read the words, but they did not register. "What is this?" "It is a receipt, Mom, for a fake belly." I reached into the folder again. I pulled out the photos Marcus had taken. Tiffany smoking in the bathroom. Tiffany doing shots of vodka. Tiffany adjusting the strap of the prosthetic in the reflection of a car window. I threw the photos onto the floor next to Tiffany. They fanned out like a deck of cards, revealing her true face. "There is no baby Tiffany," I said loud enough for the back row to hear. "There never was. You bought a prop because you knew Dad was dying. You knew you needed leverage. You knew the only way to secure the inheritance was to give Beatrice the one thing she wanted more than money, a grandson." Tiffany stopped wailing. The silence in the room was sudden and violent. She looked at the photos on the floor. She saw herself holding the vodka bottle. She saw herself vaping. She slowly sat up. The pain vanished from her face, replaced by a cold reptilian hatred. My mother looked at the photos. She looked at Tiffany's stomach. She reached out a trembling hand. "Tiffany," Beatrice whispered. "Is it true?" Tiffany slapped her hand away. "Of course it is true, you old fool," she spat. The shock on my mother's face was absolute. It was as if she had been shot. Do you think I wanted to ruin my body for your stupid dynasty? Tiffany sneered, standing up. She brushed the dust off her dress. Do you think I wanted to be tied to this loser forever with a brat screaming in my ear? I did what I had to do. I secured the bag. She looked at Dante, who was staring at her with his mouth open. Close your mouth, Dante, she snapped. You look like an idiot. We almost had it. If your sister had just stayed away, we would have had the money. We could have faked a miscarriage next week and lived on the millions. Dante stood up slowly. You lied, he said, his voice cracking. You told me we were having a son. We picked out names. I bought a crib. You bought a crib with money you stole. Tiffany yelled back. Do not act righteous with me. You are a thief, Dante. I am just a better liar than you. My mother collapsed into her chair. She put her head in her hands and began to weep. Not the performative weeping of the funeral, but the deep soul-crushing sobbing of a woman who realizes she has bet her life on a lie. She lied to me, Beatrice cried. She let me knit blankets. She let me talk to her belly. She played you, Mom, I said. She played all of you. Because you wanted to believe it. You wanted the fairy tale so badly, you ignored the reality. You ignored the fact that your son is a criminal and his wife is a sociopath. You ignored me, the daughter who actually loved you, to chase a ghost. Tiffany looked around the room. She saw the bankers looking at her with disgust. She saw Sterling looking at her with contempt. She saw that her audience was gone. Fine, she said, straightening her spine. So there is no baby. So what? The company is still ours. Dad left it to us. The debt is your problem, Zara. You bought it. You deal with it. We are leaving. She grabbed her purse. Come on, Dante. We are going home. She turned to leave. Not so fast, Mr. Henderson said. He signaled to the two marshals standing by the door. They stepped forward, blocking Tiffany's path. Mrs. Brooks Henderson said, You seem to forget what you signed yesterday. By executing the temporary management agreement, you assumed personal liability for the corporate debt. But you also attested in that document under penalty of perjury that all information provided regarding your status as beneficiaries was true and accurate. He pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. You also signed loan applications for the new house using the company as collateral based on fraudulent financial statements. That is bank fraud, Mrs. Brooks. That is a federal crime. Tiffany's eyes went wide. She backed away. No, I did not know. Dante made me sign it. Dante looked at her. You told me to sign it, he said, his voice gaining a sudden vicious strength. You told me not to read it. You said we needed the cars. You are the CEO, she screamed, pointing at him. It is your company. Arrest him. Both of you are under arrest, the marshal said. He spun Tiffany around. She screamed as he clicked the cuffs onto her wrists. Get off me! Do you know who I am? I am Tiffany Brooks. I am rich. You are broke, Henderson corrected. And you are going to jail. The second marshal grabbed Dante. Dante did not fight. He just went limp. He looked at me as they cuffed him. Zara, he whimpered. Help me. Please. I am your brother. I looked at him. I looked at the man who threw my teddy bear in the snow. I looked at the man who watched his wife humiliate me at our father's funeral. I helped you, Dante, I said. I stopped you from stealing any more. They dragged them out. Tiffany was kicking and screaming, cursing my name, cursing my father, cursing the world. Dante was weeping silently. The door closed behind them. The room was quiet again. My mother was still crying at the table. She looked small and broken. Her diamond bracelet, the one I paid for, glittered under the fluorescent lights. I walked over to her. Mom, I said. She looked up. Her makeup was running. Her eyes were full of fear. Zara, she whispered, what happens now? Where do I go? I looked at Sterling. He handed me a set of keys. You go where I tell you to go, Mom, I said. I put the keys on the table. These are the keys to a condo in Rogers Park. It is a one-bedroom. It is clean, it is safe, and the rent is paid for 1 year. Rogers Park, she asked, confusion clouding her grief. But what about the house? What about Kenwood? The house in Kenwood belongs to Z Capital, I said. It belongs to me, and I am selling it. It is too big for one person, and it is full of ghosts. Selling it, she gasped. But that is our home. That is your father's legacy. My father's legacy is this company, I said, gesturing to the window. His legacy is the work. The house was just a building. A building you let Tiffany and Dante turn into a circus. But where will Dante go when he gets out? She asked, her instinct to protect him, still kicking in even after he destroyed everything. That is up to Dante, I said. He is a grown man, Mom. He can find a job. He can learn to work, just like I did. And me? She asked. You are just going to put me in a condo alone. I am giving you a roof over your head, I said. I am giving you a chance to start over. I am giving you more than you gave me when I left. You gave me silence, Mom. I am giving you a home. I picked up my purse. But hear me clearly, Mom. The bank is closed. There will be no more secret transfers. No more paid bills. You have a year to figure out your life. If you send money to Dante, if you try to bail him out, if you give him one single dime of the allowance I am providing, I will cut you off completely. She stared at me. She saw the resolve in my eyes. She saw the daughter she had underestimated for 35 years. Zara, she said softly. I am sorry. I paused. I looked at her. I wanted to feel something. I wanted to feel relief or love or forgiveness, but all I felt was exhaustion. I know, Mom, I said. But sorry does not pay the debt. I turned and walked out of the conference room. I walked past the empty chairs where my brother and his wife had sat. I walked past the screen where my father had laughed. I took the elevator down to the lobby. I walked out into the street. The sun was shining now, cold and bright. I pulled out my phone and called my assistant. It is done, I said. Start the restructuring. We have a company to save. I got into my car and drove away. I did not look back at the building. I did not look back at the past. I had a lot of work to do. And for the first time in my life, I was the one calling the shots. The chaos in the conference room was a living thing, a beast fed by the panic of two people realizing their lives were over. Dante was hyperventilating, his face buried in his hands, while Tiffany screamed at the bankers, calling them liars and thieves. But then the screen flickered one last time, drawing the oxygen out of the room. My father had not finished speaking. Dante, Tiffany, my father said from the grave, his voice heavy with a regret I had never heard in life. I gave you what you wanted because I knew it was the only way to teach you. But there is one person I do not need to teach. One person who learned the lesson on her own. The camera zoomed in on his face. Zara, he said, and for the first time in 10 years he sounded proud. I am sorry. I was too hard on you. I thought you were running away. I did not realize you were running toward something greater. You are the only one with the spine to lead. You do not need my inheritance, Zara. You do not need my charity. Because in the end I am not your benefactor. You are my creditor. The screen went black for good. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute, and terrifying. Tiffany looked at the blank screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Dante slowly lifted his head, his eyes bloodshot and confused. Creditor, Tiffany whispered. What does he mean, creditor? I stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate, and commanding. I walked to the head of the table where Sterling stood. He stepped aside, giving me the floor. I placed my laptop on the mahogany surface and connected it to the main projector. I typed in my password. The screen behind me lit up. It did not show a video. It showed a corporate structure chart. At the top was a logo, a stylized bird rising from ashes. Phoenix rising. You asked who bought the debt. Dante, I said, my voice filling the room. You asked who owns you. I clicked a key. The chart expanded, showing the subsidiaries of Phoenix Rising. One of them was Z Capital. Under Z Capital was a list of assets. The first item was Empire Stone Construction. The second was the Kenwood Estate. The third was the land under Dante's house in Lincoln Park. 5 years ago, when you started bleeding the company dry, I did not just watch, I said. I started buying. Every time you defaulted on a vendor payment, I bought the invoice. Every time the bank threatened to foreclose, I bought the note. I bought the bad loans. I bought the equipment leases. I bought the mortgage on the headquarters. I looked at Tiffany, who was staring at the screen in horror. You said I was just a secretary, Tiffany. You said I was the help. But while you were picking out curtains, I was picking out your financial coffin. The chair you are sitting in belongs to me. The car you drove here in belongs to me. The building we are standing in belongs to me. I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table. I am not just the owner of Empire Stone. I am the owner of everything you thought was yours. Dante began to weep. It was a soft, pathetic sound. Zara, he choked out. Why did you let us think we won? Because you needed to sign the guarantee, I said, cold as ice. I needed you to pierce the corporate veil. If I had intervened sooner, you would have walked away broke, but free. But you were greedy, Dante. You wanted the title. You wanted the glory. So I let you have it. And now you are personally liable for every cent I spent saving this company from your incompetence. Tiffany stood up, her chair crashing backward. Her eyes were wild, darting around the room, looking for an exit, looking for a weapon, looking for anything to stop the walls from closing in. No, she shrieked. No, this is a trick. It is a computer trick. You cannot own us. I am pregnant. I am carrying the heir. You cannot do this to a pregnant woman. She grabbed her stomach, her face twisting into a mask of sudden agony. Oh God, she wailed, doubling over. The baby. The stress. It is too much. I think something is wrong. Call an ambulance. My baby. She collapsed to the floor, writhing and moaning. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. My mother jumped up, her maternal instincts overriding her shock. Help her! Beatrice screamed. Someone help her! She is losing the baby! The bankers looked uncomfortable, shifting in their suits. Even Sterling looked concerned, reaching for his phone. Do not call 911, I said, my voice cutting through the panic like a whip. My mother looked at me with pure hatred. Are you a monster, Zara? She is in pain. She is in character, I said. I tapped a key on my laptop. The image on the screen changed. It was no longer the corporate chart. It was a receipt. A digital invoice from a theatrical supply company in Los Angeles. Read it, Mom, I said, pointing to the screen. Beatrice looked up. Her eyes scanned the document. 1 silicone gestational abdomen. 2nd trimester. Custom match. Rushed delivery. What is this? Beatrice whispered. I clicked the next slide. It was a series of photos taken by my private investigator. Tiffany smoking in the bathroom of the grill. Tiffany drinking vodka from a mini bottle. Tiffany adjusting the strap of the prosthetic belly in the reflection of a car window. There is no baby, Mom, I said. There never was. She bought a prop because she knew Dad was dying and she needed leverage to make sure you handed over the keys. Tiffany stopped screaming. She lay on the floor perfectly still. The room was silent save for the hum of the projector. She looked up at the screen, seeing her own deception projected 10 feet high. Slowly, she sat up. The pain vanished from her face, replaced by a cold, reptilian hatred. She looked at my mother, who was staring at her with the expression of someone watching their world end. You lied to me, Beatrice whispered, her voice breaking. You let me knit blankets. You let me pick out names. Tiffany stood up, brushing the dust off her dress. She did not apologize. She did not cry. She just sneered. Of course I lied, you stupid old woman, she spat. Do you think I wanted to ruin my body for your pathetic dynasty? I did what I had to do to secure the bag. If your daughter had not interfered, we would be millionaires right now. She turned to Dante. And you? She hissed. You are useless. I did all the heavy lifting. I did the planning. I did the acting, and you just sat there and cried. She grabbed her purse. I am leaving. This is over. I am divorcing you, Dante. And since you have no money, I am taking the jewelry. She turned to walk out the door, her head held high in a final act of defiance. Mr. Henderson, the lead banker, stepped in front of the door. He was a large man and he did not look amused. I'm afraid you are not going anywhere, Mrs. Brooks, he said. Two U.S. Marshals stepped out from the hallway behind him. Tiffany Brooks, Henderson said. You signed a federal loan application yesterday for the Lincoln Park mansion. You used the company as collateral based on fraudulent financial statements. That is bank fraud. You also signed the management agreement attesting to the solvency of the company, which is securities fraud. The marshals stepped forward, pulling handcuffs from their belts. Tiffany backed away, her eyes wide with true fear for the first time. No, she stammered. Dante made me do it. I did not read it. Dante looked up from the table. You told me to sign it, he said, his voice gaining a sudden vicious strength. You told me we needed the cars. You told me we needed the house. You are the CEO, she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at him. Arrest him. We are arresting both of you, the marshal said. He spun Tiffany around. She screamed as the cold metal clicked onto her wrists. Do you know who I am? She shrieked. I am Tiffany Brooks. I am rich. You are broke, Henderson corrected, and you are going to prison. The second marshal pulled Dante from his chair. Dante did not fight. He went limp, weeping silently. He looked at me as they led him away. Zara, he whimpered. Help me, please. I am your brother. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had watched his wife humiliate me at our father's funeral. I looked at the man who had stolen millions from the father who built him a future. I helped you, Dante, I said. I stopped you from stealing anymore. They dragged them out the door, Tiffany's screams echoing down the hallway until the elevator doors chimed and cut them off. The room was quiet again. My mother was sitting in her chair, her head in her hands. She looked small and broken. The diamond bracelet on her wrist, the one I had paid for, glittered under the harsh fluorescent lights. I walked over to her. Mom, I said. She looked up. Her makeup was running. Her eyes were full of a terrible realization. Zara, she whispered. What happens now? Where do I go? I looked at Sterling. He reached into his briefcase and handed me a set of keys. I placed the keys on the table in front of her. These are the keys to a condo in Rogers Park, I said. It is a one-bedroom. It is clean. It is safe. And the rent is paid for 1 year. Rogers Park, she asked, confusion clouding her grief. But what about the house? What about Kenwood? The house in Kenwood belongs to Phoenix Rising, I said. It belongs to me. And I am selling it. It is too big for one person, and it is full of ghosts. Selling it? She gasped. But that is our home. That is your father's legacy. My father's legacy is this company, I said, gesturing to the window where the Chicago skyline gleamed. His legacy is the work. The house was just a building you let Tiffany and Dante turn into a circus. But where will Dante go when he gets out? She asked, her instinct to protect him kicking in, even after he destroyed everything. That is up to Dante, I said. He is a grown man, Mom. He can find a job. He can learn to work, just like I did. And me, she asked. You are just going to put me in a condo alone. I am giving you a roof over your head, I said. I am giving you a chance to start over. I am giving you more than you gave me when I left. You gave me silence, Mom. I am giving you a home. I picked up my purse. But hear me clearly, Mom. The bank is closed. There will be no more secret transfers, no more paid bills. You have a year to figure out your life. If you send money to Dante, if you try to bail him out, if you give him one single dime of the allowance I am providing, I will cut you off completely. She stared at me. She saw the resolve in my eyes. She saw the daughter she had underestimated for 35 years. Zara, she said softly, I am sorry. I paused. I looked at her. I wanted to feel something. I wanted to feel relief or love or forgiveness. But all I felt was exhaustion. I know, Mom, I said. But sorry does not pay the debt. I turned and walked out of the conference room. I walked past the empty chairs where my brother and his wife had sat. I walked past the screen where my father had laughed. I took the elevator down to the lobby. The air outside was cold and bright. The wind off the lake felt clean. I drove to the Empire Stone Building. I walked into the lobby. The girl with the headphones was gone. The ugly sculpture was gone. I took the elevator to the top floor. I walked into the CEO office. It was empty. The boxes of trash were gone. I walked to the desk. I sat down in the leather chair. It was big, but it fit. I picked up the phone and called the building manager. "Send maintenance up here," I said. "I need the nameplate on the door changed." "What should it say?" "Ms. Brooks," he asked. "It should say, Zara Brooks, CEO," I said. I hung up the phone. I swiveled the chair around and looked out at the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. I had won. I had taken back the legacy. I had cleaned up the mess. It was lonely at the top, but the view was spectacular. The most profound lesson from this story is that silence should never be mistaken for weakness. While Dante and Tiffany were consumed by the loud appearance of wealth, Zara quietly possessed the actual power. It teaches us that greed is a blinding force. It stops you from seeing the cliff before you fall. Building a life on lies like a fake pregnancy or stolen money is like building a skyscraper without a foundation. Collapse is inevitable. True success isn't about the title you inherit, but the legacy you build with your own hands. If you believe Zara served the perfect cold dish of justice, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of triumphant revenge,